I'd like to call this meeting to order. If we could all stand, please. Ask Pastor Rob Sparrows from Integrity Church to lead us in prayer this morning. Good morning.
Morning, Mayor and council people. Father, we thank you for this morning, Lord, as a group, as a body. Lord, we come before you, and we thank you, Lord, for giving wisdom to these good people, Lord. Father, for the decisions that they need to make, Lord. Give them courage, Lord, and strength, Lord, to withstand the opposition, Lord, that will come against them. But also, Lord, Father, bring many people around them to support the decisions that they make. In Jesus' name.
Amen. Amen. Councilman Schlachter, if you could lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
It'll be an honor, Mayor. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Carumba.
Here.
Councilman DeWitt.
Here.
Councilman Slaka.
Here.
Mayor Simmons.
Here.
Councilman O'Flynn.
Here.
Councilman Gibson.
Here.
Councilman Forbes.
Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor.
We now are on to public comment on agenda items. Any member of the public that would like to speak, please come forward at this time. Good morning.
Honorable Mayor and less honorable council. My name's Lou Cober, and I live
I'll take
in,
that as a compliment.
I
But
live in
okay.
Morton Grove, Bonita. On Thursday, October 12th, the Army Corps of Engineers had some sort of conference call. I was wondering whether we were a party to that, and if we were, would we get a report of what went on that? And secondly, this past Monday, some city representatives were out to Morton Grove, looked things over, and will we get a report of what they may have come up with?
If you would just, yes, obviously leave us your name, sir, which we probably already
Lou.
have. And yes.
L-O-U.
Right. And
K-O-B as in Bob, E-R, Lou Cober.
thank you, sir. And we will get answers to those questions for you. Thank you very much.
Oh, go ahead.
Good morning, Council.
Morning,
Mayor.
Jude.
I might take a couple more minutes. I'm addressing the City Attorney's report today. Jude Richvale from Old Bonita. After Hurricane Irma, these are not easy times for Bonita. Yet having an honest water company is as important as ever. In fact, a high-functioning water utility could work with the city to help channel stormwater into storage basins to be used as irrigation water. That it has not done so indicates a narrow focus, alienated from its members' owners that it purports to serve. In the June 21st meeting, during deliberations after our presentations, Councilman O'Flynn suggested that an outside attorney be consulted to see if the council has any power to regulate BSU beyond the parameters of the franchise. Mr. Cloud's report is chock full of answers to questions that nobody asked him. So who did ask for all this extra information? I found out yesterday that Audrey had given him oral instructions not subject to the public records law, and also sent him green sheets from 2 council meetings, thus expanding the scope of his work and billing. The legality of the BSU election process is one of those unasked for answers. Mr. Cloud gave us an evaluation of the legality of the BSU election process. However, not only did the council not ask him to do this, but that issue never came up before. I presented a 2-year discrepancy in the election results. The discrepancy is a question of fact, not a question of law. The city attorney, unlike Mr. Cloud, was present in the room when I made that presentation. She very well knows that I questioned not the legality, but the integrity of the BSU election. Yet she summarizes Mr. Cloud's opinion in her green sheet as if this is relevant, when it is clearly not. After the flimsy response by BSU CEO Mr. Jenkins that day, it became obvious that the discrepancy we uncovered points to possible cheating in multiple election years. Mr. Jenkins claims that the post office, quote, made a mistake and did not charge for the missing ballot envelopes. If this response was only about 1 year, it would be dubious, as it is contradicted by both the postmaster and the postal manual. Since this is about 2 years in a row, it is laughable. BSU being subject to the public records law is another question no one asked him. We had asked the council last year to get an AG opinion on this, but that was voted down 4-3, due to information given to the council by the city attorney that the AG had already responded negatively to Mr. Fitzgerald on this question. This was not true. The AG told Ed that only a government entity can ask for an AG opinion. Thus, the request was voted down 4-3 based on this false information. I was told by one member of the council that he would have voted differently if not for this false information. We ask again for an AG opinion on this. I had emailed council and presented to council last year that BSU is subject to the public records law based on the totality of factors. I ask for an indulgence of the council for a few more minutes, if you could. Anyway, I asked for that BSU is subject to the public records law based on the totality of factors test. Mr. Cloud actually says that based on the totality of factors test, BSU would be subject to the public records law except for one thing. He contends that since BSU is operating independently of a city for 30 years, they are not subject to the public records law. But this opinion is flimsy. The 30 years in question were years that BSU operated under a county franchise. In other words, BSU has always served a government purpose, water and sewer provision, from its inception, and could never operate without a government franchise, and thus is subject to the public records law. Finally, at the very end of the report, Mr. Cloud answers the primary question Mr. Heflin had asked, and his answer is yes. The city does have the power to regulate BSU, above and beyond the franchise agreement. Government, according to Mr. Cloud, has the power to regulate utilities, as long as it is in the public interest. This is contrary to what Mr. Jenkins has been saying, and that Ms. Vance has been seconding all these long years. However, the city attorney still attempts to cloud the issue by saying that this is subject to negotiation. I performed a search throughout the document, throughout Mr. Cloud's document, and nowhere does Mr. Cloud mention the word negotiation.
Jude, we're on the 1-minute warning.
No problem. The ball is now in your council's court, in your court council. Let's see how you play it.
All right. Other members of the public? Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. This is regarding the Green Sheet 0390, the Wonder Gardens. I understand that you're taking control of the Wonder Gardens because they can't meet their commitment of the loan that they owe you. Do you have any, it was devastating to come back into Bonita and see what happened to the Wonder Gardens. Do you all have any plans for that, or are you just playing it by ear until, first of all, it gets cleaned up? And I know it's part of the downtown Bonita restoration, but do you have any plans for the Wonder Gardens?
This is not a question and answer
Oh, okay.
unfortunately.
Okay.
But believe me, I know you and I are going to get together for coffee or lunch soon, so.
Okay.
Thank you. Just please make your comments.
Okay, the next thing is, I'm impressed with Green Sheet 0400 that was put together with all the questions regarding the background and all the comments made about what we could do better the next time the storm comes, before and after. So I just wanted to know, I was very impressed with that, and if you all did a workshop, I don't know what you call it here, when you get together and discuss these things, I would be very interested in being a part of that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much.
Oh, I didn't tell you my name, but she knows what my name is.
Morning, Ed.
Good morning. My name is Ed Fitzgerald. I'm speaking in reference to the attorney's report on Thomas Cloud's investigation. There's two little items in it that I'm disturbed with a little bit. And one is Mr. Cloud's opening statement where he says that BSU was created under Section 617, and therefore absence of regulatory power over the utility will not be found nor expected in that section. But BSU was not found under Chapter 617. It was created under Chapter 125, Powers and Duties of Government, And upon the granting of the 1970 franchise by the Lee County Commissioners, the exercise of regulation was created and clearly stated in a 16-page document that details the duties and obligations that must be performed by BSU. Those duties have not been changed over the years since the Lee County transferred the franchise to the city. There was no question as to the oversight responsibilities for 45 years. And the city of Bonita Springs acted acted in control of the franchise when they made changes. They changed the franchise from an exclusive franchise to a non-exclusive franchise, which basically is illegal. That cannot be changed by the city council, and yet it was in a tariff. The city also allowed or took away the duty of BSU to provide a distribution system of reclaimed water in Bonita Springs. BSU changed it to they will provide reclaimed water individually to a resident if that resident will pay for the pipes in the street from their home to the wastewater plant. This city also gave the board of directors of BSU power to deliver irrigation water to customers outside the franchise area, to any and all customers at any price and in any quantity they desire. That is an absolute difference in the franchise completely. The franchise dictates that there will be an irrigation system that delivers water to every building and the occupants thereof. They will provide it, not that the citizen has to pay the piping. The city also changed the franchise to put in a statement that the customer buying reclaimed water from Bonita Springs Utility must provide irrigation storage on his site. That basically is opposite to the entire irrigation business. Storage of irrigation water is the responsibility of the wastewater factory plant that makes it, not the individual who receives it. Okay, so I believe Mr. Cloud's report on that issue was incorrect. And the statute of limitations, Mr. Cloud makes another incorrect statement saying that the Sunshine Law does not apply to BSU. And then he writes a 6-page report with nuances and situations and experiences proving that a yes or no answer to that question is extremely difficult for anyone. There is only one decision maker that may give that answer, and that is the Attorney General Biondi. You, Mr. Mayor, properly asked for that opinion, yet this council failed to provide it for you. So what's going to happen after this hearing, after the review of this report? I believe you're going to find that the complaints filed by Mr. Jude and myself are valid, and you will find that BSU initially violated the contract. 1 sentence. 1 sentence.
Absolutely, Eddie, hang on. I don't know.
Thank you, sir.
Progress. There we go.
The major and critical violation of BSU performed and that we reported to you is that they diverted 5 billion gallons of reclaimed water from the residents of this city to a private company. That decision still is valid and incorrect. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Other members of the public? Morning, Trish.
Good morning. Trish Leonard, for the record. I'm the president of the Everglades Wonder Gardens, and I wasn't here to speak on that today, but I just want to say thank you again for the council and the city staff for helping us and also for picking up the debris. That will help a little bit for us seeing us. But I do want to invite you to our November 5th opening day of the Everglades Wonder Gardens. It's a Sunday. We would like to kick it off at 11 a.m. with a ribbon cutting with the city council, if you're available. We also plan to have Royal Scoop ice cream, hot dogs, all free, donated by our community, and from 11 till 3. We are also planning our board retreat, which is next Wednesday, hosted at Northern Trust Bank. And then, of course, we have our retreat with the City Council scheduled for Monday, November 13th here at City Chambers. We are working hard. If you see I was there yesterday, and it's a different Wonder Gardens, but it's going to be a really wonderful experience as we grow together. And I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Trish. Morning, John.
Morning, Honorable Mayor and Council. John Pano of Bonita Springs Downtown Alliance. First off, I wanted to thank the council for their leadership in these most hard and difficult times. It is not easy for anyone, and I'm certainly sure it wasn't easy for you. Also, I'd like to thank the volunteers that we received to help out in Irma. Dozens came out to help clean up the river and get rid of styrofoam and assortment of other things, and they're still out there working daily on it. Many of the volunteers came from Apple, from Pelican Landing, from Real Talk Radio, NBC, Wink News, and Naples Daily News, and the Banner helped get the word out that we needed help, and people responded excellently. Also, while I'm on it, I'd like to make sure to invite everybody this weekend. Bonita Springs Downtown is open. The road is open and finished. We have Riverfest and the Imperial River Challenge. So many organizations that came forward. The Imperial River Conservancy putting up money for the race. Grumpy Goat Coffee, Cosmo Beauty School, Survey Cafe, Twisted Tangle, Sheer Unity Salon, CGT Kayaks, Jim Weeks, Kenny Kepler. We had just so many different, the city of Bonita Springs, let me make sure I mention you guys and thank you for your support, Benson's Grocery Store. So many other people have come forward and are still coming forward for this weekend's Riverfest. Thank you all again.
We'll see you there. Other members of the public?
I'm a member of the public.
Good morning.
My name is Martha Wunsch. I live in the war-torn Imperial Bonita Estates, named after the river that needs to be controlled, if possible, Tourism, I know, is the main point here, I would think, at least in season. Our park provides tap dancing, synchronized swimming, bridge. We play pinochle. We do. Our recreation department is really, really active, and people are so discouraged. And I know that the water. I was in Indiana and Illinois for the internment of my husband, with my family. But I saw CNN. You know, we're famous.
Ma'am, could you bring the mic a little closer?
But
Thank you very
we're
much.
famous in a bad way. You know, CNN had boats, and they went out off of Quinn. You know, it's really embarrassing, I would think. Tourism is the main point here. It's the main point in our co-op, and I'm hoping people will come back because of our good programs. But there's discouragement, and it looks war-torn, just war-torn. Amen.
Thank you, ma'am. Other members of the public? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to proclamations and presentations. If we could ask Tamika Seaton, please, to come forward.
Good morning.
Yeah, why don't you? Well, good morning. This is from the City of Bonita Springs, a certificate of appreciation presented to the Florida Lions Eye Clinic for your outstanding service in providing free eye care to those in need. Thank you for all you do for the citizens of Bonita Springs, signed Mayor Peter Simmons, October 18th, 2017. Thank you very much. Congratulations.
Thank you very much for having us today.
Oh, can I speak?
Yeah, absolutely.
Of course, your nickel.
That's all right. Well, thank you very much for having us today. My name is Tamika Seaton. I'm the executive director at the Florida Alliance Eye Clinic, where we provide free eye care for people who do not have medical insurance and are 200% below the federal poverty guideline. We've been around since 2008, and we've helped over 10,000 people since then and provided surgeries accordingly. So we're really proud of that. Right here in Little Bonita Springs, we're the only free eye clinic in the state of Florida. We're really proud of that. I'd like to introduce Dr. Richard Shapiro. He's our medical director at the eye clinic. He provides wonderful services and dedicates his time, and also Trish Leonard, who is on our board of directors. So with that said, I would like to invite all of you, if you're able to come, to our third annual Eyeball Soiree, which will be held on December the 7th at 6 p.m. at the Southwest Florida Event Center. Thank you so much for having us.
Oh, absolutely. We were lined up. Would you like to say a few words? Would you like to say a few words?
No.
No? Oh, you sure?
Go ahead.
Very extemporaneously. There are many worthwhile organizations in the state and in the country, and of course we think ours is very important. We might be the only one in the country that is Lions Club supported and a free eye clinic. And we provide eye exams, we make sure we do some surgery at the clinic, and what we can't do, we send out to cooperating ophthalmologists and optometrists in the area. And the Lions Club itself, you know, we do screenings, and we do screenings also. And then we also will give glasses or make arrangements for families to have glasses at a very low cost. And it's fun. We enjoy doing it. We love doing it. And thank you very much for the award.
Thank you very much. Keep up the great work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Doc, thank you.
Okay, we're now going to move on to item B, a presentation and update on the City of Bonita Springs 2017 Mayor's Challenge application by the Southwest Florida Regional Planning Council. And this is Green Sheet 17-10-0395. And hello.
Good morning,
Arlene.
Mayor and Council. Arlene Hunter, Assistant City Manager. This morning, I'd like to introduce to you Tess McMorris and Jim Beaver. We have been provided with a draft applications for the Mayor's Challenge. The application is due this Friday. We have been in complete communication with the Southwest Florida Regional Planning Council, and they have been assisting staff with the process. So we'd like to have them give you a brief overview of the scope of the application and go over the process a little bit with you a little bit further. And so I'd like to ask Tess to come forward, please.
Great. Thanks, Arlene.
Good morning, Honorable Mayor and Council. My name is Tess McMorris. Thank you. I'm here to discuss with you.
Pull the mic up just a little bit. I'm sorry. Thank you.
I'm here to discuss with you the scope of the Mayor's Challenge as well as our progress, give you an overview of the general idea and some of the impacts. So as we all remember, Irma just delivered a severe blow to this community. And even a month later, disaster cleanup is still underway, as we can see from your palette, beautiful artwork here. Bonita Springs was and is at an increased risk for flooding based on its topography, its low elevation, as well as the combination of the 4 formerly separate watersheds that have now been combined into one. And in accordance with the Mayor's Challenge criteria, the city's initial application is to describe the urgent challenge, which we've defined here as flooding is the most urgent challenge. The city application is titled Taking Back the Watersheds, which aims to remove the man-made barriers and restore the natural river flow to alleviate the flooding damage naturally, to create to return the four rivers to their original paths and create a hydrologically sound flood reduction policy. It's clear that at this time, long-term solutions need to be put into place to alleviate further human and financial devastation that is caused by unmitigated flooding. This idea expands upon the Netherlands idea of giving the river room, but instead of focusing simply on the rivers, we're focusing on the root of the problem, the watersheds that are overburdened. The innovative solution will be transferable, which is a criteria of the Mayor's Challenge, in addition to innovative vision, impact, and implementation. The rivers affected are the Cocohatchee, Imperial, Spring River, and Halfway Creek, and they will be returned to their original watershed path, creating a hydrologic solution that will be transferable and implemented. This two-pronged approach to flooding deals with returning the watersheds to the original path, as I said, and which will spread and reduce the water volume across all the watersheds, naturally reducing the damage of flooding, as well as returning riverfront land and access and vistas to the public. This is very clearly a global solution to a local problem, and participation by residents and positive impact on citizens and council is very important. Some of the target impacts, what we're really aiming to achieve with this application, would be by 2021, the number of properties prone to flooding would be reduced by 50%, and by 2021, the economic losses from water-related disasters will be dramatically reduced, and the focus being on the most vulnerable communities being alleviated from flooding and feeling more secure. I have Jim Beaver to answer any technical questions, if you have any at this time.
Right. No, thank you very much. That was a nice presentation, and of course, just for a quick recap for folks that may not know how we've gotten to this point is
Right.
A few months ago in Miami, when I met Mayor Michael Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York City, and this is in coordination with the Bloomberg Foundation and looking for mayor participation around the country. We have a lot of stiff competition, so I might add, great job. I'm very comfortable with where we've gotten to this point, and now it's really, truly council's input that I'd like to hear, about this, and we'll start with Amy.
This has to do with this particular thing, but I really am interested in, we've done several things over the last couple of meetings, and we're continuing to address various specific things. I like to see how it's coordinated with the other activities that we've done, from our legislative priorities to the mitigation list that we just gave out, to the work that we're asking Jim Beaver to do, and finally the thing that comes before us today on the engineering contract, because it's not clear to me how they're integrated. And I wanted to be
Jim
sure
can answer
that
that way better than I
work is,
can.
what we're doing doesn't, that they're compounding.
They are
solutions.
concurrent efforts,
That
absolutely.
They're definitely compounding, and that what we do in one area is not countervailing what we're doing in another area. That's when it's not clear to me
Right.
at all that that's what's happening.
The proposal for Bloomberg fits into the larger planning that we're doing for flood reduction for the city of Bonita Springs. So think of this as one component of one of the things that I'm bringing to you in this plan. And this one's specifically finding funding to address the issue of putting the watersheds, which have been combined to make all of the water go through the Imperial River, back to the watersheds where the water should be going. Some of the flooding that happened within Bonita Springs happened because water that should be going to the Cocohatchee River ended up staying in Bonita Springs, in the Imperial River watershed. Some of the flooding happened because in the past, because of engineering decisions made by a number of different entities, ranging from the Federal Highway Administration, the state DOT, private developments and things that were permitted by the Water Management District and things that happened even before there was regulation, sent water that should be going in the Spring Creek watershed and water that should be going in the Halfway Creek watershed down to the Imperial River to go out for the Imperial River. So basically, think of it that at one time you had an Imperial River watershed that the Imperial River handled. And now you have added 4 watersheds together and still asking that same outlet to handle all of this additional flow. As development has increased within the upper watersheds, the top of these systems, with impervious surface, and many of these built without the proper stormwater management systems, more water was thrown off than used to sit in and sink into the watershed to provide groundwater. So that's also added to the flooding. The Bloomberg application requires that your proposal be innovative, something someone's not done before. So we couldn't use one of the other components we are looking at in terms of flood reduction, which is standard procedure that you can normally do. This is something that hasn't been done before. And by utilizing the skills of the people in the Netherlands, it fits into their area of expertise and modeling. And so you're basically doing a thing which has not been done in the United States before, basically getting back to putting the water where it belongs, returning the watersheds. So this fits in to what I've been working on for you with that work, and actually complements other things we've applied for, such as the NOAA grant on Spring Creek, and the other work that you're moving toward in things. So yeah, I'm doing my very best working with your city here to coordinate all of these things and making sure nothing interferes or prevents another action from being taken place.
And I just have one more question, because I think council had prioritized what we call somewhat short-term solutions to specific highly damaged areas. How would that integrate with that? And I envision that we'll have some project, a specific project coming before us relatively soon, whatever that means, you know, like in a few months, so that we can get to work on those things, so that those people that are most tragically affected by the storm will get at least some relief, even if we can't give them, you know, a long-term permanent relief. How does that work out?
Those actions, the shorter-term actions, are the things which are being proposed within your legislative agenda. So the funding you're asking for in your legislative agenda are the things that can be done right now, that can be done to alleviate some pieces of the flooding problem. This Bloomberg grant is for the longer term.
The longer term.
And so that you can set up a system which will not tend to flood for the whole system.
Right.
And actually will help every part of the communities that were flooded by Imperial River water. And potentially this will also, once we get the Cocohatchee part done, help with the flooding which happened east of the interstate and south of Bonita Beach Road. But the things with the clearing of the flowways, some of your communities, I shouldn't say believe it or not, but I'm always was fond of those stories. You have communities here that don't have a drainage system. Quite literally, they were built with no swales, no culverts. They're level, flat, in a floodplain. So they have no means to get water off of them once precipitation exceeds the saturation rate of their soils. So those are the sort of things that can be done more immediately. This watershed restoration will take longer. The grant itself has 2 components. There's a $100,000 start planning piece and then $1 million follow-up to implement part of the plan. So yes,
If we win.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying as the grant goes.
Well, go for the $5 million. Then, Jim.
Optimism is always a good
when
strategy.
we win, right?
Yes.
Third hardest hit community in the state of Florida.
And it is innovative. So this is what we're talking about here for this grant is long term. The things that are in the legislative initiative that you're considering and that I've worked with you already on, those are the shorter term things.
Okay, thank you.
Greg?
My only concern is when we talk about restoring the watershed, is that talking about taking communities like I think in one of the presentation within by 2020 to have 50% reduction in flood water properties already flooded, and how is that by restoring those properties back to wetlands? Are we talking about taking people's property away from them? That's my concern on this. I mean, because if we're talking, let's say big picture, let's say we win the whole Magilla, that's $5 million. That's not even a drop in a bucket on some of these properties when you're looking at, let's use, what I would say that one time, Citrus Park itself is on the tax rolls at $21 million. That $5 million is just a mere drop in a bucket for it.
These funds are not for that purpose.
Okay.
These funds are related to the complex modeling which is necessary to show where the water would go and how you could direct the water to those places, making sure that as you put water back into Spring Creek, back into Halfway Creek and into Cocohatchee, you're not transferring the flooding to those watersheds. So no, this is not for property buyouts within the floodplains.
All right, because I was just going by.
Yeah, that kind of funding comes from places like the federal government on areas of repetitive loss, and there's a whole program associated with that when you have properties which are flooded over and over and over again, needing regular reconstruction.
Mm-hmm.
Ostensibly, if we were able to fix some of the watershed issues, we would be able to turn some of those properties into properties that don't flood at all. No guarantee, and I want to make it clear, this is flood reduction, not flood elimination. So those places which have been basically built in the river, and you do have a few places that literally are within the river's course, they will not be in a situation where they won't be subject to some future flooding at some point if you have extreme storm events. And given the changes we've had in our climate here in Florida, we will have more extreme storm events with a higher frequency of occurrence.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Sir?
Yeah.
I just wanted to address that the target impacts for the Mayor's Challenge are exclusive to the challenge. So like Mr. Beaver said, the impacts are target goals for testing and implementing the innovative idea, not necessarily, I spoke with Ms. Hunter about this afterwards. When it comes to after the testing phase and implementing the project, we are allowed to seek other funding sources and find other policies that may fit better along with the hydrologic solution that we propose in the challenge. The policy that comes afterwards would be, like you said, I understand that some of those communities are worth millions of dollars, way more than the $5 million allotted for the application and for the implementation of the innovative idea. So that's the target impact exclusive to what we're aiming for. And it, like Jim said, it's also a flood reduction, reducing the amount of people that are affected in the city as a whole.
Well, I guess that's my question, is the reducing the amount of people that are affected by flooding by relocating them and removing them from the property and then returning that property to the watershed. Is that part of the goal? That's what I'm asking.
Okay. Well, I think the best answer.
Or is it too early to tell right now?
The best answer for that is when, if we win, when we do our testing, the models that will be used for testing the area and for understanding the general feasibility of the project will dictate then what has to happen with people's homes, properties, etc. And that, I guess it is too early to say then.
Okay.
I would actually want to add something to that. Taking and removing properties so that the floodplain can be restored is not a goal. The goal here is flood reduction.
Okay.
Removing buildings from the floodplain is a tool. And in the course of the study that I'm doing for the city, I'm going to show you every tool that's available to you and benefit costs to those tools. So there's a lot of different ways to address flooding that people have used in America. And some of them worked, some of them haven't worked, and some of them have worked for a while and then caused even bigger disasters. I direct your attention to New Orleans. People have tried to keep cities underneath the level of the sea with a lot of engineering and a lot of expense. People have tried and succeeded in the city of Galveston of raising the whole city. That worked for a time. People have basically accepted the idea that their cities are going to have navigable streets at certain times of the year. And in fact, some of the design here in Florida for water management, surface water management systems in some parts of South Florida, they will show you in the engineering design that the way your community is going to work is your stormwater ponds will fill up, and then your golf course will fill up, and then your streets will fill up, but your houses won't get wet. And the engineers have actually designed to that, and the Water Management District has permitted that in South Florida. So these are all tools, but the goal here is not to do any specific tool, but for you all to look at the tools you've got available, look at which ones are going to work for you the best, and then you select which ones you want to use. So the model's not going to tell you what to do. The model's going to tell you how we can do a thing that can reduce the flooding. So my goal for you all and all of these studies, whether it's the Bloomberg grant, whether it's the FEMA application that we've put in the legislative, is to reduce your flooding, not necessarily to use any one particular tool.
Or to eliminate flooding.
I can't eliminate flooding. The fact of the matter is as long as the landscape has nobody on it, there is no such thing as flooding. But once people start putting structures and roads and other features into the landscape, and the water level comes up so that people feel that these are threatened, then we've defined a flood. The natural system here in Florida had a wet season and a dry season. We're a savanna. And the original settlers here built their old Florida cabins on the highest ground they can find, and then they still elevated their buildings so that they were up, and they let the water flow underneath. And you talk to any, I know some of the families here that go way back to even before the state existed, and they will tell you they were used to going through inches of water as they went into town with their ox carts, their ancestors did, and that was just part of being here in 2 months of the summer. And we have changed, we've redesigned, we've terraformed this community, we've made a different thing, people are trying to live in a different way, and that's the way it is. And so now we try to manage the water so that we can reduce our flooding. But we're not going to eliminate it, because anytime you're going to get 12 to 20 inches of rain, you're going to have standing water for some time period.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Greg, anything else?
No, thank you.
Steve?
I said.
Yeah, you're okay? Yep. All right. Peter?
Yeah, Jim, thanks for doing this, for Margaret and you as well. Really from a standing start, no more than 3 or 4 weeks ago. Just a short comment, since I was the guy who thought of the idea. My idea has nothing to do with taking people off their properties, so I don't know how we, and I think that, I don't think that. The idea was to reach out, so to speak, to the Dutch for innovative solutions. Obviously, if there's a country near Holland that has a good idea, that'd be good too. And I think what I've heard Jim clearly saying, he's alluding to run of the river in Holland, and he's analogizing it here to really run of the watershed. Not the river in town, not taking people off their land in town, but the watershed. And that means more water going south. It means investigating where the water used to go further out east. It means dealing with the watershed above us. It's not taking people off their property. That's not part of the Bloomberg challenge. So, thank you.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Pete. Mike?
No, I just want to say I'm very impressed you were able to put this all together, and it looks very professional, and I think we've got a good shot. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Fred?
Yeah, first of all, I think the time frame was more like a little more than 2 weeks, not 3 to 4 weeks ago, which makes it even more remarkable. I'm going to ask Jim a question to enlighten those that don't know history about Bonita. You were telling Matt Feeney and I
Survey?
Monday. You were telling Matt Feeney and I Monday about the survey party originally locating in the Quinn Street area. Would you repeat the story and tell them about what time frame that was? Wasn't in the 1800s, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it was the latter part of the 1800s, but before the original foundation of the city. The mapping of the Imperial River was originally done by an Army Corps of Engineers team that was also working and setting out the section township lines and putting in the memorials and the elevations for the area. This was part of the United States' interest in knowing everything they possibly could, for military purposes and navigation purposes. Because at that time, the way people did things was on the water. The main mode of communication to get things into Florida always came from the sea and up the rivers and streams. So the survey team established itself a camp in what's generally the Quinn Street area today. And they called the area Survey. They were not very inventive. And they called the Imperial River Survey River. And that was the original foundation point. And then that camp that they established became some of the original settlement for your area. And I got this information from your historical materials here that the city has. And they were there for a while, and then that town flooded. And so it was decided they were going to not continue to occupy there, and they moved up to the ridge, which is where old US 41 is today. So your original old downtown was then established as the new location for Survey. And then later on, you became Bonita Springs when a landowner who had a daughter named Bonita wanted to name the community that he had purchased up as for her, along with the fact that you had so many natural springs at that time.
Do you know what year that was exactly?
I'd have to go back. I'd have to go back to the material that I read.
Okay.
I was actually
I'd be very interested because
perusing that before a meeting.
I'm being reminded it's before the Red Sox won their first World Series in 1901. Oh, thank you, Councilman O'Flynn. Fred?
This was before 1901. Now, my purpose for doing this was twofold. First of all, that was before all these 4 watersheds got amalgamated into the Imperial River. There was no I-75. There wasn't even a US 41. But the Quinn Street area flooded to the point they had to relocate their setup to the ridge. So this area does have a long history of flooding, and there is, as Jim says, there's a lot of solutions in the toolbox. Now, Councilman Crumba asked for an overview of where we're going. I could do it now, or we can wait till we get to the agenda item. Whatever you want, we could also either then or now address what we were doing on Monday when we happened to go through Morton Grove. Whatever the mayor and the council wants to do is fine.
Council, what's your preference?
I'd rather just get this Bloomberg part done.
done. Okay.
Good.
It's not too far in the future.
Yep. So anything else, Fred? Anything else, council? The one thing I would like to add is, and I'm sure it's in the material, that we could let Mayor Bloomberg know that we were the 3rd hardest hit community in the state of Florida. Any of these, any of these facts that I'll be giving to the Lee County delegation today that we think would be helpful for the grant would be the only thing that I would add. Amazing job, team, fabulous, and thank you. Looking forward to it. Arlene?
Mayor, we just, 2 things for Council Member Crumba. She had asked about the long term, and you've been expressing that, Mayor, about the long term. This would be at least a 3-year commitment. Should hopefully we are a recipient, and it's a long-term commitment with the Bloomberg Association, and they have said that's repeatedly on the webinars. And additionally, we'd be asking for a formal motion from the council to
Sure.
to move.
I'll
this
make
forward.
that motion.
Second.
And there's a second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman Dewitt?
Aye.
Councilman Slackman?
Aye.
Mayor Simmons?
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn?
Aye.
Councilman Gibson?
Aye.
Councilman Forbes?
Aye.
Councilwoman Caramba?
Aye.
Council, thank you very much. Thank you, folks.
And if I may, I'd like to say that Tess, is our intern, has joined us, and she took the lead on this and has been the main moving force in making sure we were all putting together. We each contributed our part. But best credit should go to Tess.
It goes without saying,
Thank
but
you, Tess.
Tess and everybody,
Thank you for this opportunity from the Southwest Florida Regional Planning Council and myself.
thank you. And it goes without saying, but let me know whatever we can do moving forward in the process, and we'll get that mayor sent off, letter to Mayor Bloomberg. Yes, Fred?
Yes, question. Tess, when do you graduate?
I should graduate this semester.
Oh, really?
Yes, this is a portion of my graduate curriculum is an internship, and I'm very lucky to be here and be a part of this. I feel very fortunate to have gotten to in a very, very short amount of time, put together this application with your collaboration, specifically you, Mr. O'Flynn, and Margaret and Jim, and also our attorney, Beth Nightingale, helped as well with the drafting.
Be a nice internship project to put on your resume. I
Right,
mean,
for sure.
honestly, so
Absolutely,
absolutely
yes.
look forward to working together continuously.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Fred?
I'm sending a message, tell her by mental wavelength.
Okay.
Okay, great. Okay, we're now going to move on to the consent agenda. Council, take a look there.
And as a reminder, there is one additional item on the errata, or
Oh, what's
on the
that?
errata. What is it? Yeah, I'll pull D on that extra one, please.
D?
Yeah.
Council?
Did
Move
we
the
talk
rest.
about
Yeah,
C?
motion to approve the rest?
C? Oh,
Oh, you want to pull C, Fred?
just to
Okay.
talk about it.
Motion to approve the rest?
Second.
Okay. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman Slakta.
Aye.
Mayor Simmons.
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn.
Aye.
Councilman Gibson.
Aye.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Councilwoman Caramba.
Aye.
Councilman DeWitt.
Aye.
Item C, Fred.
Yeah, I just was curious about our, we haven't done this quite this way before, where the automatic approval, unless, I guess, either party can bring up that we want out of the agreement. We have to do it, I think, by August, I believe, according to the green sheet.
I think this is something, didn't you
Laura?
bring it?
Yeah.
I was gonna say, didn't you bring it up to?
Laura Taylor, Director of
Yeah,
Communications.
that's
We did have a 5-year agreement for the Lions Club previously in the downtown area. This is a reoccurring application
Right.
that we see every year.
Right.
We have not had any issues with the applicant running the market downtown. To make it a little easier for the applicant moving forward, I believe our city attorney assisted with putting in the renewal terms.
And Laura's correct. It's my, we did a year-to-year for a few years here. This previously was a 5-year. I reinstituted it to be able to treat it as a 5-year, so we're not constantly going back into this process.
Right. Okay, I so move.
Well, I had
Mike?
one question about Depot Park versus the Lemon lot. They used to do it there, but they moved because of the construction. And do they want to stay in Depot, or did they want to move back over?
I believe that they do want to move back to Lemon Tree Lot this year.
Okay, so this saying Depot, and it's not going to preclude them from being able to move back over.
No, it won't.
We can amend the
can amend
agreement
it.
at any time to change the location.
Okay.
Okay.
I second Fred's.
Okay, it's been a motion and a second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mayor Simmons.
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn.
Aye.
Councilman Gibson.
Aye.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Councilwoman Caramba.
Aye.
Councilman DeWitt.
Aye.
Councilman Slakta.
Aye. Amy?
Okay, I just want 2 clarifications. First of all, why is this coming to council? And second of all, could I have an explanation of why we have this building requirement as to the pipe size? And I know it said that it was, is it merely to accommodate fire service, or is there another reason why we have that in our code?
It's predominantly for water flow and capacity in a given area. So we have an interlocal agreement. That interlocal agreement says the city is responsible for having the adequate pipe size reach the library, to the library site, the
No,
drop
that's
site.
not the question. The question is to take a step back, and we have certain building, maybe John could address this. We have a certain building code requirement as to pipe size to be used in our building, and it must have been determined that we have this pipe size for some purpose, all right?
Correct.
And now we have a development, which is our library, and this pipe is below what we require.
There are a handful of standards that go into sizing fire flows in fire prevention.
It's for a fire prevention
Correct.
purpose. It's not for some other purpose.
Correct.
That was basically the question.
One of those standards is the size of the line that attaches to a hydrant. Currently, we have an 8-inch line. The requirement is a 10-inch line. The reason why we're bringing this forward after discussion with the fire district, is that the other standards that are in place that establish minimum flows, gallons per minute, gallons per second, are adequate, and they do meet the standards. The standard that is not met is the size.
Okay. So the quantitative measure of whether it's adequate for fire protection are being met, and so it's somewhat irrelevant to the size of the pipe.
Correct,
So there
at this
shouldn't be
time.
any issue.
And I don't want to go too
do you mean
deep
at
into.
this time?
Well, what happens is, as people tap into lines, water is diverted to go to different hydrants or to
Right.
different locations. At this time, the flow is there. If sizes are increased, we would look to have the 10-inch line attached to this hydrant if it becomes available. So that way we don't have to worry about development as it goes, because we do want to provide that fire protection. We are going to be working with the fire district to make sure that protection is still there even after this discussion.
So at a later time, if a larger pipe goes in, then we'll connect it later. Is that
Yes,
what-
ma'am.
Okay, thank you. And it has been approved by the fire chief?
We have,
Okay.
well, not by the chief. We've been working with the fire
By
marshal.
somebody.
He
Correct.
hasn't approved it, he's deferred it to the city.
Yes, that's
Okay.
probably
And what
the
does
more
that
accurate.
mean when you defer it to the city? It's our responsibility?
Deviation.
Yes.
Plus the deviation.
If he had objections, we would listen to the objections. He has not voiced objections, so he has given it to us to process. Is that an adequate statement, somewhat? Maybe?
Maybe.
And that's why it's
Enough.
before council, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Because he deferred it to the city, and normally we would not be seeing this if he did not defer to the city.
Well, this section, not all sections of the fire code are in the land development code, but this portion that deals with the line size is located in Chapter 3. To deviate from Chapter 3 is a technical deviation that needs to come before you for your ultimate approval from the land development code standards.
Okay.
Another good example would be the width of the road. Says it's supposed to be
Mhm.
X. We've deviated down to 11 based on anybody that comes into the old 41 area must be sprinkled
Yes.
from this point forward.
So, John, the deviation, if appropriate, would be to allow the 8?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Right, okay. Thank you. So
Thank you.
move.
Okay?
Second.
Second, okay, great. There's been a motion and a second, council. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman O'Flynn,
Aye.
Councilman Gibson.
Aye.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Councilwoman Caramba.
Aye.
Councilman Dewitt.
Aye.
Councilman Slacker.
Aye.
Mayor Simmons.
Aye. Okay. Mayor and council member items. Discuss Hurricane Irma and provide staff direction, green sheet number 17-10-0400.
Okay. I'd
Yeah,
like to,
I
jump
would like
in.
to defer to Amy's list.
Okay,
Let
Amy?
her go
Yeah,
first. 'cause
yeah. Since this is the third pass with what I'm trying to do here, and I'll try to keep it organized because actually, there's quite a bit to do. I want to start just with the assessment. I know we're going to be talking about these materials that are given to us, and I appreciate the work that's been done, and I'm not 100% sure who did the work here, but whoever did, thank you for the work. But I want clarification, first of all, on, is this a damage assessment primarily to comply with FEMA requirements? Because it's not, is it complete, or it's not really complete, right?
The city's required to do a initial assessment. It's an exterior assessment only. And there were 2 of those completed. One was for flooding purposes only, where water impacted structures. The second one was done by the building department and our own crews. And those were to determine only structural damage, all right? If structural damage was created by flooding, then part of those flooded structures that you see on one map will also be part of the second map, all right? There is another assessment which FEMA wants us to do, and either wants to do it themselves or we can do it, and that is where we get more internal assessments. And that's going to happen. First off, internal assessments, I'm stepping ahead of just the assessments we've talked about with flooding and structural. Because as people are coming to the building department now, they are using those structural assessments exterior to determine whether or not they need to go to the interior. And people who are looking for permits, there are times when we have to go into the unit with their permission only to determine the extent of damage.
May I just?
Sure, go ahead.
Because This is my question. Like, for example, what I've been trying to do is to reach out to every neighborhood in District 1. Much more difficult than I thought, but anyway, I'm starting to get some responses back. And in my own community where I live, I just heard the other day that at least three houses in one street had flood interior intrusion. That's not on our list. So this is what the question is.
Well, it's because we weren't aware of those. mean, we
Well, I
can-
know,
Yeah,
but this
okay.
is what I'm saying,
Right.
is that, for whatever reason, that we may not have been aware of that by just driving through the neighborhoods, and I don't know who drove through Pelican Landing, and these people have been away, so they just came back, and maybe they just discovered. I mean, there are all kinds of these situations. You know, we have a lot of cage damage, which, again, it's not flood damage, it's due to the hurricane. So, and for two reasons, I think it's important that at some reasonable time frame that we address these, what I call secondary effects of the hurricane, especially if we are going to funding sources. If we don't identify the total damage to the city, I think it will hurt us in the long run when we try to get support. And I don't know how we do that. If we have to go, my suggestion under the communication post Irma suggestions was that we establish these relationships with the individual neighborhoods long before we have an emergency situation, because at least even though I think I have an incomplete connection to the neighborhoods in my district, it's pretty good, and they're starting to respond to me, and I think that I'm able to get material that way. But I think that's something that the city should do, should have these connections and try to get to the neighborhoods to get this information. So again, for the council's point of view, as we make these decisions, unless we have a total understanding of what's happened to our city, I think it's very hard to make decisions. So I think that's really, really, really important to do that. I think my second point, one of the other.
Can we?
Yeah, Pete.
Can I talk to the map, or do you want to keep
Pardon
going?
me?
Can I talk to the map point?
Sure.
So two questions, Carl, about the map. The non-block, the map of damage, not floods. What you have here is in yellow. The non-block yellow, is that not in there? So, for example, Bonita Bay is not in yellow. I don't see any damage in Bonita Bay. What is it?
Damage is only going to be on that map if it was minor, if it was major, or if it was destroyed.
Right, but I'm asking about what's been covered. In other words, there are blocks that you have on here that are in yellow, and behind it, they all add up to this number. But there are many.
Bonita Bay, so I don't know.
Sorry?
I was going to say there was a lot of damage in Bonita
So
Bay,
there are
as you
many
well know.
sections. I'm trying to understand what you've done here, because there are
Be
many
that as it
sections.
may.
There are many sections of town that don't show any damage, and they're not in yellow. So you're not including them?
Okay, I don't know. John,
Well, no, I'm
you wanna
asking you,
try to-
Carl, sorry. You sent us the maps. I'm just asking. In other words, what?
Asking somebody who actually helped put the maps together. But I
Well-
will tell you structurally,
Right.
there may have been very minor damage. I mean, below minor.
I'm
They
asking
were not
what,
listed.
I'm asking what we've asked staff to do, because there are sections here that are not here. So why, we didn't ask them to do that?
When they went out and they looked at the city, they've covered the building inspectors for our department, and also we had a handful of inspectors from Cape Coral that came down to help
Right.
out for a couple of days. What they've done is they've gone out and looked at the structures. There is, when you're looking, saying there's affected, there's minor damage.
I'm sorry, John, I'm not being clear, all right?
Sir.
Just.
Okay.
All right. So I'm looking at this,
Mhm.
which has backups. I'm trying to understand it. And it has sections that are in yellow.
Mhm.
All right. And those sections in yellow all have individual pages behind them.
Yes, sir.
There are many sections that are not in yellow and therefore do not have individual sections behind them.
Mhm.
Massive parts of town. What I'm asking is, so they don't show any, they don't show any damage of any sort. So what I'm asking is, am I looking at this correctly? Were those not surveyed? Were they not covered? Or are they here and they don't understand it?
We did the entire city, and what you're looking at is a map that goes through FEMA definitions, And really, the only thing that's not there is a list of affected houses. And the
Okay.
reason why affected wasn't listed was because almost everybody was affected,
All right.
and it was distracting on the
Fine.
map.
So could I just, not today, but Carl, get Bonita Bay and what's included in this number from Bonita Bay? So, because it doesn't show on the map. So it sounds like what you're saying is, it was done, it wasn't mapped out here.
Correct. There's a layer on there that deals with a designation known as affected.
Right.
The problem is affected is such a low standard and goes to minor. It can include anything from a couple of branches down to a slight piece of fascia off
Well,
of a
but
building.
we had
to-
major damage in Bonita Bay. We had, we had roofs torn off, we had.
Correct.
I mean, from
That's
my
not
house, I can see
affected.
2 tarps on 2 roofs,
And the tarps can be on a roof for a couple of reasons. There could be a small leak. There could be major damage. So we'll go back and we'll take a look at that. I understand.
That's helpful, because I just had the impression from looking at this, probably incorrectly then, that this was simply a sum of only the areas that are in yellow. You're
Correct.
saying it's not?
It's not, and there are
Okay.
other structures out there. The problem is that what some of the things that we're talking about and some of the specific locations you've talked about, we may or may not have even been able to identify from driving on the street. A lot of those areas that are damaged are really only visible once you're inside the structure. So even though the tarps came out a couple days later, when you drove by, there could have been no visible signs of damage.
So let me just take one, and this is not my job, I'm just like, I get this stuff and so I'm like, I got a question, okay? So, one of the communities, they sent out, the community association, it happened to be San Remo, sent out a few days ago a memo to every member of that community, and they said that 170 roofs were damaged. So, but on this map, it doesn't show anything in San Remo. So how does stuff like that, how do we get to, I'm going to call it the correct answer?
There are several correct answers, and I think it's going to be depending on who's asking the question as to what the correct answer is. And that's probably not the answer you're wanting to hear, but it's a situation where if there is our FEMA assessment that was done days after the storm was simply done based upon a categories established by FEMA that our inspectors were to go out and check a box. Is this affected? Is it minor damage? Is it major damage? And it's very generic in nature and doesn't go into a lot of detail because they don't enter the property. They don't go inside the structures. If it's not visible from the exterior or from especially the roadway, it's not listed. Now, 170 roofs in San Remo sounds like a different story because at that number, you would look at that being a varied amount of damage, some visible from the outside and some not. I would like to go back and talk to the inspectors that were out there to figure out what was included and why things were not included.
Yeah, I'm not really, I'm coming from a very simple place, all right?
Yes.
Which is, we've had major damage in this town. Everybody knows we've had major damage in the town. And I would be hopeful that staff would be trying to figure out a way to document that damage. That's all. So I don't think it's my business to say you should be having this done, that done, the other thing. That's why I was asking Carl, because to me, I'm just looking for a complete assessment that jibes with the reality of what happened, that people know happened. So,
And that's
I
a
would,
fair question.
170 rooms are not, 170 roofs, I would assume at least would be minor. That's all.
Well, I think, and I'm not trying to, I guess looking at it a different way, because of my field of work, is, a broken leg to you may not be minor, but to somebody else it's major. And that's why I think.
I think a roof
Say
is
that
damage.
to the Boston Celtics.
A roof is damage.
Well, yeah, but I think to John's benefit, if 2 shingles are off, or if the ridge vent is off, that is not minor damage. That's insignificant.
You see, I don't even want to get
Well, I think that,
into
but I think
that.
that's what it is. I think when the inspectors
So-
went out, they had
I
here's
will-
what minor damage looks like. Here's what major. Here's what incidental damage.
I would like
what
to
I'm
ask
what I'm getting
Knowing
at,
when we went out as the fire department, that's what we had to go.
so what
by.
I'm getting at, Greg, is like a different thing, and maybe it can't be done.
Right.
Maybe staff can tell us we're incapable of doing it. It can't be done. All right. Which is, I'm just looking for what the damage is. All right. And maybe that means staff would want to call up the community associations and fact find and find what the information is. I don't think we're here to tell them how to do it. I think my view is, as policymakers, we're here to ask them, can we have a complete list of damage that's been done in town? That's all. And I don't want to get into the, I mean, I'm not saying you're in the weeds, but any more than I started to be. I don't think it's my job to get into the weeds about how John Dolmer is doing it, or, you know, who's surveying what or not. I'm just looking for a list of damage.
But I think, though, it does kind of get into weeds, because if the soffit is ripped off of someone's house, that may not be significant enough to meet the FEMA guideline. We need to give them
It's
the
not the
guidelines.
FEMA guideline. In other words, I think that's the question that Amy asked, all right?
Well, I get, but going back to yours, like you said, San Remo, they sent it out. Someone in San Remo may have said, that is damage to my roof, whereas it doesn't meet it. And that's what I'm saying. If we're going to ask John and the staff to say what is damaged, we need to give them a criteria of what we expect.
We need to give
see.
them a criteria, then forget the assignment.
Well,
I'm just thinking out loud.
If I might just
Yeah.
add, and this is probably repeating what John just said, is that this assessment happened days after the storm, and it was done from a vehicle. So if it was, we did not go in people's backyards. If it didn't look that damaged, it wasn't going to be marked down as anything affected or minor, whatever. So the actual damage is probably going to be, has been determined by the owners of what the damage was and what the impact was, especially inside.
Right.
If we're talking roofs, for examples. And when we finally find out, will be when those people are, their contractors, are actually coming in for permits to repair. I mean, that's when the real data is going to be there. So for the purposes of this assessment that you
Right.
saw, this is what qualified licensed inspectors found on their drive-throughs of the exteriors of the property at that time.
So then we should, so this is only for council. This is not for FEMA, right? This damage assessment here,
Well, FEMA's going to have.
right? Is that-
This goes to the
I guess
county.
this
The
went to the
county's got
county.
this map. This map came from the county. We provided the data to them, all right? FEMA has this information as well, because they're going to have an opportunity to follow up with some of the hardest hit
So I just think
structures.
I think we're massive, for our own purposes. If we have a community that says 170 rooms were damaged, let's say only 10 were really damaged on your standard, all right? The 10 are not here, okay?
Right.
So I'm just, my frustration comes from the fact that we're asking for, we know we've had massive damage in town, massive, massive damage. It's all word of mouth, people know it, okay? And it's not showing here. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that.
I understand what you're saying.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Fred.
Well, I wanted to add to the confusion here a bit. First of all, the second map, which is the first time we've seen it, is a good step in the right direction. I agree with Deputy Mayor O'Flynn that it needs to be enhanced.
Right.
We started out with the same thing on the street flooding map, and it's been enhanced several times. Now, with regard to roofing, Greg's right and Councilman O'Flynn is right. Roofs, well, no, I mean, there's something for everybody.
I didn't think we were arguing.
No.
That's why we can't make a
Here's
decision.
the thing. First of all, I saw the people inspect Hunter's Ridge, and they weren't in a car. They were on foot. They walked all the way around each building. They didn't do a win. Now, I can't say that they did it that way at all of them, but that's what they did. Maybe they did that because I was there, but they didn't even recognize me when I challenged what the hell they were doing there. Anyway, if you look at a roof, and most of the roofs here, especially in these communities, are the tiled roofs. If you don't see any tile displaced, it's pretty easy to jump to the conclusion that the roof isn't leaking. Secondly, a lot of the owners were up north when the hurricane came, as we all know. We call them snowbirds. So I think a lot of the roof, I'm sure that there is 170 homes that have roof leaks in San Remo. And I think that depending on how old the community is and all that, you'll have similar numbers. And we're going to have to ferret that out. One way, they'll get some indication there'll be a lot of roofing permits for San Remo. We're going to have to talk to the communities like was suggested. But an area that they absolutely, I think, missed, and they're expensive. I know in Hunter's Ridge, probably 25% of the pool cages were trashed. And a pool cage costs 15, 20 grand to replace. Now that may not be in the allowable by FEMA, but I think there's two categories of damage we're looking for. And that is what FEMA calls damage by their standards. And then secondly, what is damage, whether it's covered by FEMA or not. Because when we go up to the state legislative for requests for money, we go any place, the more we can show what the real damage was to the community, the better off we're going to be. And I think Amy was pointing that out. And in fact of the matter, even though I'll bring it up again when we get to the other item, 2 of the 3 firms that we talked to on Monday, they have people from their company up in Tallahassee working with the FEMA people right now, 4 cities, to help them get their fair share of the FEMA grants, public assistance grants.
Carl, I guess all I would like to add, and Carl and I obviously have a follow-up, not obviously, I suppose, but for update for those that may not know, with Governor Scott's office, County Commissioner Larry Kiker, Thursday, I believe, Carl, right, is our follow-up call, to look at this exactly. We've already discussed it. It's already in the works. We've discussed it. You've probably heard me say it on TV, or maybe not, but there are parts of town where permanent relocation may make sense. We shall see.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Yes.
Really, that bothers me when you say that, because I don't think that should, it may have to be in the mix, but it be so far down the mix until we've addressed all these other things. This is when I go to one of my
When you go to the Pink Flamingo Flea Market
No,
and look at the
when
trailers out back?
Well, I'm telling you, when I go to these communities, and I think what I hear from IBE and some of these other really strongly affected communities, and I had a discussion with John Dolmer about whether people could rebuild it under what circumstances. In fact, one of my points that I'm making here is I think we need to clarify those things. And what bothers me by having conversations with various Lee County commissioners, they have a mantra which immediately goes to, these people should not have built there. Well, they have built there after a long history, and I'm not convinced that they all have to be relocated. Maybe one house or a couple, but it shouldn't be that should not be the solution. If that's the solution, we're not doing our job. So I really think we have to push back against that element that sort of blames the victim, and that's the way I see it. So I'd like to have a discussion about that before we start talking about it, and I'm not in favor. I just can't subscribe to that.
Okay. Well, it'll come to a full council for a vote at the
Yeah.
appropriate time.
Yeah. But I think this is not.
And I appreciate the conversation.
This comes from the
And I
vic-
also appreciate people, Amy, that had 5 feet of water in their house. They deserve a place that's dry to live.
Yes.
That's where the place
But
in my
that's-
heart where this is coming
Well,
from.
nobody-
No other place.
Nobody wants.
And when we
them-
can get more land for water storage as hopefully part of the solution, which we're
Exactly.
trying to do right here, that's where it's coming from. There's no other place, just so you know.
Well, I agree. Nobody wants anybody to live in 5 feet of water. I mean, we agree on the problem. I don't agree on the solution, and I wanted to speak up for that.
Thank you.
Peter, I would just add this, and I know where you're coming from. Absolutely, I know where you're coming from. Other people are not coming from that same direction. Other people are coming from the direction of not where you're coming from. It's first words out of their mouth, those people never should have moved there.
Right.
Second word out of their mouth, those people never should have moved there. To me, in my view, and it's not where you're
Yeah.
coming
No,
from.
I agree.
But
Point well
but,
made.
all right, but that is a big deflection. It's the same crowd who for years said flooding is not a concern in Bonita Springs. Flooding is a scare tactic in Bonita Springs. The same crowd who said 95 floods, those are a thing in the past. It's the same crowd we've been fighting for years who are trying to put thousands and thousands of homes in our DRGR area. So what you hear from, not every last person, but what you hear from is first thing, second thing, third thing. Those people should be out of there, all right? Now, it very well may be that we do have, some people have to be relocated. But that is a one-sentence mantra I'm getting tired of hearing from some people. I was in a meeting, I'm not naming names here, but I was in a meeting a week ago, and it was actually explained to me that half of Bonita, quote, never should have built there. Well, maybe they shouldn't have fouled up the watershed east of town, all right? Maybe the water that went south should have continued to go south. Maybe that watershed could be protected in a lot of ways. Maybe more water could be held on the land. That crowd of people's not interested in that, all right? They were interested in putting thousands of homes in Edison Farms. They wanted to put a ballpark in Edison Farms. They want to run a major highway right through that part of town. That's what, in my view, that's what this is all about. So I know you're nowhere near that.
That's why we're a council of 7?
Yeah, yeah. You're nowhere near that, but that is part of that mantra. So
Thank you, Pete. Fred, and then Greg.
Yeah, first of all, and I'm going to say there's all kind of tools in the toolbox. Another option to relocation, and we don't seem to talk about it as much as we could, and that is you can stay there, but you've got to build higher. Like if you go down in Quinn Street, there are about, I don't know, maybe 8 to 12 of the homes that had no real damage because those homes were built elevated up a full floor where the only thing that's under it is a car parked and storage. So there's a lot of different tools. And I know the mayor, what he's saying. I know what Deputy Mayor Flynn is saying. I hear Amy. I think everybody's right. Somewhere economics will have to come into this. There's a thing called cost reasonable. The other thing, though, that I think the county, South Florida Water Management, they need to understand something. Every one of these home sites were built while we were a county that are the big problem areas as far as repetitive flooding. They approved this. They approved whatever drainage system was in effect. They have an obligation to pitch in and help pay for this because they approve, including most of those homes that are east of I-75 were approved under Lee County before we were a city in '99. So there is an obligation, I feel, that everybody has that approved this, and they all wanted the people here. Why did they want them here? Get that ad valorem. So I mean, so we're all in this together, and I think any conclusion about there isn't going to be any one solution to getting our city in better shape. It's going to be a lot of different possible solutions. But the one thing we have to remember, what you do over here does sometimes affect over here. And the biggest problem they had with this flood, people wanted to pump water. South Florida Water Management was willing to let them pump with one caveat. You got to show us where you're going to pump it so that it's not going to affect somebody else worse than already. And that made the tire hit the road real hard.
Worser for wear, Fred?
Worser for wear, yeah. We could pump in some places, and other communities couldn't pump, or they had to wait till the river got down a little further. I know in Greg's district, he ran into that. So anyway, that's my 2 cents worth.
Great. Thanks, Fred. Greg?
I just want to echo what Amy said. I think what I keep hearing is instead of, and no offense to anybody on council, was first thing we keep saying is relocation, not let's look at it and fix it. Relocation should be the last thing on the list. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying it's a scare tactic, but let's be honest here. 95 happened. Since 95, when's the last flood? Other than 2 weeks before?
09.
09, well, that's what I'm saying. So we keep saying that it's, 09, so what's that?
8 years.
8? No, longer than that. if it's 09. It'd be
17.
Let's say 7.
7, 8 years, but I'm saying, my point is that, we hear Councilman Forbes always talk about, building east of town, building east of town. Well, those developments weren't there in 95, still flooded. In 08 or whatever it was, still flooded. So it's, some of that's true, but I think some of it is on the county level and on the city level as far as maintaining the ditches, maintaining the waste, or not the wastewater, but the sanitary septic, or the sewers, and maintaining the river. Those are the first line that we should be looking at. Last line should be, okay, if all these things have happened, we've fixed all these things, we've got the ditches clear, we've got the river clear, there's no snag hazards, we've restored the flowway to Spring Creek, to Oak Creek, Lightner Creek. I've gotten 2 emails in the last week about trees being down in Lightner Creek. It's a creek, yeah, it may not handle the amount of water that the Imperial River, but it's going to handle some of it. And if we start looking at it, and I think Mr. Beaver talked about it before, there was ways of shunting the water under I-75 that weren't done because of conservancy. People didn't want to mess with the natural flow, whatever it was. I'm saying, let's look
Liberty
at those,
Youth Ranch agrees.
Yeah, let's look at again, like Amy said and like we've talked about, relocation may be the last ditch effort. But let's talk about that as a last ditch effort instead of the forefront of saying relocation's out there. Because let's be honest, nobody on this council's home is infected by that. It's easy to sit here and say, yeah, relocation may be a reality, but I don't have to relocate. Nobody up here was in that area that where we'd have to relocate, and it'd be real darn easy for us to say, yeah, relocate. We don't have to pick up our stuff and leave.
I agree.
And for them, that's a matter of
So I'll
reality.
share all these media interviews with each one of you, okay? And when they keep asking and asking and asking what is Bonita Springs doing and why is there trash on the streets and why people are flooded and why people have ripped out sheetrock and drywall, absolutely. I think we all should have a turn letting them know, share our vision, and through that, we'll have a better product. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. So that's great. That's why we're a council of 7. And Laura, we'll tee up Councilwoman Carumba on the next media call.
Okay. Sounds
Okay?
good. well, that's or did you
Yes, no, and
I
did you
have
want
one
to, yeah.
I did have one more comment
I
about
only
this
have-
damage thing.
I only have 18 more things to do because you
quick.
didn't let me speak the last 2 meetings.
Oh, it's a filibuster, is that what it is?
No. Go ahead.
Real quick, kind of on the whole damage thing, since we're on that.
Yeah.
Would it be appropriate, and I'll ask Carl to either ask Laura or whoever, would it be appropriate if we were to tell the people or send out an email blast to say, if your home was damaged, whatever it is, please let us know?
Right.
Because like I said, John did the drive-by and may not have seen it, but obviously, according to the Homeowners Association in San Remo, they had 170-some. Now we know that. Could we, would it be appropriate, Laura, or would it be too overwhelming to get 45,000 emails?
That's on my list.
Sorry.
No, I'm not saying it.
That's one of my lists.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Laura Taylor, Director of
All
Communications.
right, I jumped ahead.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
I think it is important for us to find out what has happened in our community, but we also need to be careful that we have parameters set on interpretations of what has happened. I think you all have discussed this pretty well here to say a roof being damaged or flooding inside the home or on the outside of the home. So if we were able to put some clear parameters on what we're looking for, I think that would assist us. And I'll defer to Carl on whether or not he would be able to handle this staff-wise.
My suggestion is that is management's job.
Yes, I
Okay,
agree.
it's not our job. But, when I get something from Bonita Bay that says, we got the roof torn off the new fitness center, we got a roof off the club,
there's no
and
dot
we're not
here.
here.
Right.
I don't,
Gotcha.
that's not a nuance.
Right.
All right, so I just leave that to Carl, and that's why I was asking Carl, not the rest of staff.
Need
Not
more
nothing to do at
dots on
all.
the map, I agree.
Yeah.
Steve, you've waited patiently,
Yeah,
your turn.
thank you very much. I've got probably 2 or 3 thoughts here. John, regarding the cages of the pool, are they considered major damage?
As I understand it, that was not one of the criteria for the FEMA condition. They were looking at the principal structures.
The house itself?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
All
It
right.
doesn't mean that we don't locally treat it like a big deal. It just means that for that assessment, that was not their area of focus.
Okay. The other thing is, kind of Greg touched on it a little bit. What I'm concerned about is we're pushing this off on the staff, and I disagree with it. I think we as a council have a responsibility. If this is information that you guys need, you know, I know where the houses that have been damaged. If you go around Vanderbilt Lakes, I'll tell you, like John indicated, you know what? I've got 7 cages down there. You cannot see one that's damaged from the road, okay? And John, I know you went through there when we had the first flood, and you know, that was very important. I told the people that you were there and all that, and it was very important. But I think we as a council have a responsibility to give this information to the staff. And I don't see why we can't do it. It's very easy.
I certainly can in my neighborhood. Fred?
Well, I was going to offer to do something. I'll draft up, with the help of John, a letter. I would suggest that instead of we sending out to the 45,000 big, because that goes clear up to Cape Coral, that what we do is each of us as council people send it. I know I've got a list of people that I can send to that gets it into each community, and then I can go to the HOA president, but I can ask each person that receives it to forward it to their neighbors and their friends in that community, or East I-75. I can go to Morton Grove and hit them and all those places.
I think
Then
this.
see what we get
Sorry.
that way. Then that may require a bigger e-blast, but I think we're all known in our district, I would think.
I think that the staff, I would like Carl to figure something out here, because I'm doing something similar, but it's just for my own interest, you know? And I don't think we're set up to do that, because I don't know if any other, no, correctly, maybe Fred has done this, but it has still been an exhaustive job for me to try to make those contacts with each individual neighborhood within District 1. I'm in pretty good shape. I think there's one that won't respond to me, but if that hasn't been done already, it's monumental to make those connections, you know? So maybe you can do it in District 6, or maybe if you should be able to do it in Bonita Bay. I can certainly do it in Pelican Landing. I live there. But it's all the other neighborhoods that I'm having issues with, and I don't think it's going to be any easier for the staff to do it. I do think that I would ask Carl to figure something out. I think you understand that we want to have a fuller picture of what the damage is, not so much focused on FEMA, but just so we have an understanding of what we're dealing with.
And let me respond if I might. So I've heard the discussion. The standards here are different than the standards that we've been working under, and we're fine with that. Here's my concern about where we're at right now in terms of our ability to communicate. We do have a list of the vast majority of neighborhoods and a particular contact in each neighborhood, and we've been using that. But I don't know where that contact goes beyond that person. And if they're an officer of an HOA or something like that, they change out often. So maintaining that list is a difficult thing. I might suggest, if council will approve, that we spend some money, and if you really want an answer from every person, we go back to the old ways and we send them a hard copy letter through the mail.
I'm sorry. I'm not looking for an answer from every person. I don't know that we are.
Well, I think we were just asked if we
No,
should
see, in other words,
be talking to every
so
person.
I'm sorry, go finish.
Sorry, sir, go ahead.
All right, so I don't think, this is somehow being described as a different standard. I'm nowhere near that. What I'm saying is, we have a piece of paper that says, this is the damage, and I happen to have just one where they said 170 roofs needed repair.
I understand
okay?
that, sir.
It's not a matter of the standard of the damage. I think it's a matter of how we compiling this data. And so I've got a very loose I mean, if somebody's roof is damaged, I think that's damaged. Greg makes a point, maybe if it's a shingle, that's not a roof damage. I think that's for you to figure out. I don't think there's a distinction here on what the standard is. I think there's a distinction on what the process has been to compile the data. And that's totally within, my view, city management's prerogative. We're a policy-making body. We're not here to tell city management how to do its job.
I understand what you're saying, sir, but we bring the data to you based upon established processes, and the data is either flawed or in some other way found unacceptable by this group. And that is why it's important, if we're going to be bringing you back another product, that we understand clearly what your expectations are.
But Carl, why wouldn't your answer be, my God, if they got 170 roofs and I don't have it on my list, I got to go figure that out?
Well, I'm sitting here thinking that, sir. but-
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So
I understand that.
I would think, from my perspective, that would be my reaction if I were the city manager. It wouldn't be, I need a new set of standards from my city council. I would be, geez, how did I miss that one? Or why isn't Bonita Bay on this map? You know, or why isn't Pelican Landing on this map? Or, you know, or maybe it is, whatever. I'm sorry, Carl, but to me, it's your job, not our job. That's one person's opinion.
Council, anything else?
Well,
Amy?
I have a lot more.
Can we move on? Let's go on to the next point.
Yeah, my next point is communications, and this is somewhat of, you know, afterthoughts of how we might be able to do better. And I stayed here during the storm. I wasn't at the Emergency Operations Center, so I think I.
You were missed.
Well, I experienced what it was to live through, you know, to really do the hurricane.
What about us, DeWitt? What
No,
about
but you,
Sorry.
you were in an emergency operations center.
Built to the same standards as your condo.
Oh, sure, yeah. And anyway, but let me make a point. All
The
right?
back roof where we were got ripped off.
Well, we got water. No, but anyway, the point I'm making is that many of these comments is what I experienced personally, and I think that people who stayed here during the storm probably had a similar experience. Right? We did a tremendous amount of communications, and the mayor did wonderful jobs. Everybody did a great job, but it was directed to people who had power and internet access. That's what I think. I think that we tried to do whatever we could, and I'm not disparaging that effort. So I think as a aftermath, we have to think about what happens when people just don't have that.
And that's when we were, and you're right, with
Yeah.
power, it feeds into TV and
Right,
radio, Amy, I
right.
get that, but at least if they had their card, they had radio. So that's why I did, quite frankly, an over-the-top amount, because the media really served, and Laura and
Right.
Carl, you know, as an way for information to get out where email wouldn't work and
Right.
telephones wouldn't work, or other ways where people could hear
Correct.
the information
Our-
in
our
the
most-
aftermath of the hurricane.
My
Greg?
experi-
I'm going to
my-
call on Greg real
but
quick.
let me just finish,
Okay.
because it's all related. And I don't want anybody to say, you know, I just want to tell you my experience, and we probably need more time to talk about it. Our most valuable piece of equipment was a crank radio. I mean, an old crank radio that you get in an emergency radio, because we were able to have connections to the radio. I would have liked to have had the message repeated constantly on some station, so if I didn't happen to hit the time that these things were transmitted, we didn't get the information. That's, again, I just want to give you my experience.
And let me address that. I'm not gonna be as elusive as
Right.
Councilman Forbes was on a certain thing, but right now I've been talking to Mike Bodie, and I've got an appointment. I've got 2 calls into Wink Broadcasting and Renda Broadcasting.
What was the word used? We're curious.
Elusive.
Elusive, okay.
Elusive.
Are you gonna-
I'm
For
telling
Jim
you who I'm
Beaver.
talking to.
Jim, you were a mystery guest
Yeah,
at one
mystery
point.
guest. I'm telling you who we're talking to, and in the future, I'm going to get with Mike, since he's on the technology, about getting about an AM station in
You're not
the
gonna make us
future.
guess?
We actually brought this up at the last
Yes, yes.
technology
Right.
meeting on Monday, so.
Great,
All right.
excellent.
So like I said, I've been in, Mike Bodie, if you didn't know, he used to be in radio broadcast. He's going to work with me on that. He's one of our CERT members at the fire department. And I've got
He's a
calls
Miami
in-
Dolphins fan, though, isn't
Yes,
he?
and a Hurricane fan.
Oh, boy.
Oh, my God.
Amy,
would you get
back to you?
No, but
that is a
I'm
concern.
just telling you, and thank you for doing that. And again, I just reiterate, I really can't emphasize enough how much I feel that we as a city need to have active points of contact with every neighborhood within the city. That someone, when we send an email, they send an email back and say, I got it and I'll work on it, you know. A lot of and it's just impossible to keep these lists active. It's such a hard job, but somehow and it's not for every person in the district. We need to have groups of contact. So like if you go, it's good if you have a homeowners association who would be the point person, but that I think would really help tremendously. And just from a council's point of view, at some point I would like to have what would have been beneficial to me to have a better understanding of what was going on in neighborhoods outside of my district, a total picture all along the time. We're getting it now, but I just kept saying, what's happening here, what's happening there? And if I tried to go out there, I couldn't get there because it was flooded. So I was frustrated that I didn't have that information in a little better way. Again, just commenting on a website, I know we're redoing our website, but I found it, especially under the stress of what we were dealing with, stuck where we are because we were blocked. Thank you again for getting our trees out of there. Was the idea that our website had a sequential, it would just roll. And I would going there and I was already going nuts, and to sit there through this roll drove me berserk. And I know the same thing happened with Neighbor Next Door, Facebook. There's no summary of what the heck is on that website. So to me, I had trouble dealing with it. I know that our neighbors had a side website that just dealt with, it wasn't through their city website. They just had a website that was set up specifically to handle damage information. And it was done in a tabular way instead of this rolling information. So you could click on flooded streets, or you could click on who to call for help, or something like that, so that you could go in there easily in the 5 minutes that your internet was working on your phone, which, you know, if you didn't have Verizon, you never even had internet. It was just a more efficient way of getting the information. Let me see, the same thing for Facebook. And I applaud and I think that in desperation, or probably as part of the process, and we did do this in the city, is that we definitely need a flyer system, either going into the neighborhoods or in the strategic points where people would naturally congregate, so they could get the same information that would come on this special purpose website. I think should be it. We should continue to do that. Let me see. And I just have a question, is that I know we use 211 to do everything except an emergency. Do we need something, like right after the emergency, does the city need some kind of a contact mechanism so that people could get the information by calling one number? Did 211 work? I don't know, I never called it myself. I mean, it was mainly for needs, you know, but was it for information, and did they have enough people? I don't know how that worked at all.
Right. Would you like a response to that?
Sure.
Okay, so our experience with 211, which was actually United Way, we were giving that number out to folks who were looking for answers like what was going on in Bonita Springs, but more like, how do I get help? What are my next steps? Those kinds of things. And those were people who were looking for water and food and clothes and places to stay and all of those kinds of things. We found, and I think Councilmember Forbes experienced it personally, and I was standing there when it happened, was that 211 at some point in time just was overwhelmed. And so what we did was, at that point, we called upon the Bonita Springs Assistance Office, and we started giving their number out to folks calling us about where, and also into the media, about where to get help immediately.
So that was basically a helpline, but
yes.
Would it be necessary to have like an information line so we don't, you know, crowd them out? They should be focused on helpline, I think, the 211 and even Bonita Assistance. And they also had volunteers, so I mean there was some issue about getting information that probably only the city people really knew what was going on. You in the operations center, I'm not sure if you didn't have access to power that you could get it. So just a consideration. Should we?
Right.
Should
We'll
we
make a note of it.
Should we do something else?
Right.
I don't know.
Make
It's
a
just
note
a
of that.
question that I'm asking. Well, that's all I have on on there. And then I have another section that I call miscellaneous, if you want me to do that, or else I'll give somebody else a chance. Thank you.
You want to bounce it up a little bit?
This is what happens when you shut me up for 2 meetings, okay?
It all comes out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I had a-
Excellent work, Councilwoman, by the way.
I had a few to
Outstanding.
add, and everybody needs to understand this is in the context of lessons learned. There were a lot of great stuff, great things done. We've talked about that. So I sent council an email I received from, I sent council an email from Kathy Green, who lives in what we're calling Dean Street South, which is the area south of Dean Street, west of the Imperial Parkway that had significant flooding. And I mentioned last week I met with 35 of the residents there, and we had a very good conversation, constructive feedback and such. So, but on the points along the lines of lessons learned or things to think about, one of her comments was from them and their neighbors is we were flooded to the point that trucks couldn't. Let's see. Wait a minute. Actually, there's a bunch of things. Let's see. Here's what she says. There was no city presence in our area. On several occasions, the police were called to attempt to get vehicles to slow down. So that's, yeah. So we had flooded streets. We clearly had the fire district responding to emergencies, and I'm sure Greg or someone else in the fire district could talk about what the fire district was doing. But we've evidently had situations here where, whether it's in this area or Shalimar, where there was serious flooding, and our residents were saying, no one came to knock on my door. And I think that's got to be addressed. Now, I'm sure if they call 911, the fire district would have been there quickly and the police would have been their district. But the question is, and I don't know that we can answer it today, but I do think we should be thinking about that, what our response should be in that situation as a municipality. And, you know, maybe it relates to the higher trucks that Fred was talking about at one point, I don't know. But I don't think it's good, clearly in hindsight, if someone's in their house, they can't get out, the flooding is, you know, really serious, it's not puddles, and they kind of feel isolated. So that's one point on that.
Peter, before you go on to the next
yeah.
one, can I address that? I'm not questioning the validity of that statement, but I remember very clearly when, in Citrus Park, when I've got emails from my friends and relatives, they're saying, hey, take a look at this. And they said they have not seen the fire district truck there once. And they've been there so many times. So I just had to discount that conversation.
I wouldn't discount this.
I didn't say that.
Okay, fine, yeah.
And opinions are like belly buttons. We all have them.
You know, these are, I believe, facts, okay, from people who experienced this hellish situation for a while. When we were flooded, so this once again goes, this is clearly a lesson learned. Well, I don't think you'd expect this necessarily up front, this part of it. Maybe we would, but when we were flooded, there were no signs on Bonita Beach or anywhere around our area. Many vehicles were destroyed because there was no warning of how deep the water would truly be. The only police, National Guard, FEMA assistance we received was on Thursday night, so the hurricane was on Sunday. After the second flood, they came at 2 a.m. using a loudspeaker, requesting people to come outside if they needed assistance or bottled water. So that's, I guess there's a theme of perception and attention that comes through this, and what can we do structurally to improve that?
Sure.
So those are those thoughts.
I had signs in the streets that I'd walked for weeks wondering where I was. So, hey, it happens. Greg, did you have something to add?
Well, no, I'm just trying to figure it out, and I'm
Not too far where this came from in front of me.
Yeah, and I empathize with Kathy and her sending all that out. I'm just trying to figure out, like you said, figure out how we can get from point A to point B, because I know when the storm hit. Well, let's go prior to the storm. The governor said, "Hey, if you stay, you're on your own," because you know he made it clear we didn't know. all during the storm, they were saying about, 10 to 15 foot of storm surge. So we kind of knew what it was. After the storm, I guess, when you're looking at it at a city level, for the most part, it was the city manager, assistant city manager, Laura Taylor, and Matt Feeney are the only ones I knew of, and the mayor, and obviously some of the city council were the only ones in town. So I'm just trying to think, we've got 20,000 residents, residential homes plus, how we don't have the manpower, fire department, sheriff's office, or the city to do kind of what they're asking for, to knock on everybody's home. I know we need to do something, and again, I don't know how to get there. And I don't even know how to get there even a week later, because, for a week later, staff still wasn't in because there was no true power, no phone system in City Hall. So I'm just trying to think of, how do we get there? Is it by the radio station like Mike and I is trying to work on? Is it by other means? And, yeah, it would be great to have enough people to go and knock on every door and hand them a bottle of water and say, but is that logistically possible? I guess
Yeah,
is the
I
question.
don't, I might have misspoke. I wasn't speaking about, I'm not trying to be flippant here, but I wasn't speaking about 20,000 doors. I was just talking about a community that was seriously flooded. So let me give you an example. A lot of people, I see Don back there. When Manic Christian flooded in '09, Gary Price, I'm not saying Carl should have done this, but
No,
what
I
happened
know.
then was, Gary Price went in there with up to his whatever, with water. Don called him, and, Don was in touch with Father Stan over in St. Leo's. And in that situation, those people, they got him the heck out of there.
Well, and I understand
So
that. I
I'm
guess
not
we gotta
saying that,
know.
I'm not saying St. Leo's is still available, Father Stan's no longer there. But,
Right, yeah, I
all right?
understand
But,
that.
but what I'm getting at is, I think these are things to think about, but
Oh,
I'm
no,
not
they
suggesting
are.
20,000. I'm saying, what if you, go back to your example, what if you were in your home, on your street, right, and you had 4 feet of water outside for a week?
Or worse yet, inside.
All right, what would we expect to be happening then? And I think it's reasonable to expect in that situation that the government, whatever that means, okay, whether it's
Right.
whether it's fire, or whether it's the city, the government should be knocking. I think it's clear the government should be knocking on those doors.
And I know we
Clear.
did this, the week later, we brought in USAR, we did
Okay.
knock on doors
Right.
and things like that, but it's one of those things that this was so, it was isolated, but it was also widespread.
this is-
And that's what we need to know, where those places are, because, I've got a couple emails after I made the comment about Citrus Park, IBE, the Quinn Downs
Right.
area. Then I got a couple emails.
Right.
Don't forget about the Pinecrest area. Don't forget
Right.
about South
Right.
Dean.
Right.
So those are things that, the Worthington area was, I won't say is neglected, but it wasn't one of the ones in the news as one of the harder hit areas. It had 2 to 3 foot of water. Those are the things that we need to know. And I'll put it back on the fire department, as Councilman Slack said, hey, we're not out there. I can't come help you if I don't know you're there. And that's some of, we need to know, and how do we get there is what I'm trying to figure out. How do we know they're there
I don't
so
think
we
can
can go check?
I don't think
them?
we can figure it out today, but I
No.
believe
And I
it.
sent you on a goose chase through
Yes.
it, through, unintentionally,
Yeah.
obviously, but
Yeah.
turned out to be a wild goose
We
chase.
do need
Yes,
a
Amy.
better coordination of, like, some of these things can be addressed through the homeowners association. But that's, here again, if we don't know who the contacts are, and we need to do it ahead of the storm, like if, 2 weeks before the storm, we should update those contacts, and that we're gonna call you to find out if you need help or
I
something
know
like
in my
that.
district it's
Yeah.
hard, because
Yeah.
even in the Quinn's Down area, south of Dean Street, there isn't a homeowners association. It's
so-
just a
There,
neighborhood.
there is now.
No,
Well,
so,
that's
so
something
the,
like-
but there's
Thankfully.
a finite amount of those, we are, how much?
District 2, they're all of it.
75%, well, see, you gotta work harder.
And the crossover at District 6.
Well, 70% I think are gated communities, homeowners, and those are gated communities. Then there are other homeowners associations that are not gated, so I think we have it is conceivable that we would be able to make some contacts ahead of time. And some communities have, like a callback system where people could register and they say, somehow we would be aware that they're here, because that's the other problem. You don't even know if they're here because we have so many seasonal residents. But it's a logistics problem that I don't think is insurmountable. It's a communication problem that we have to think about, and how all the system works together. you know? And there's the red alert, which
We
people.
do have it, I was just
you
saying, the
know,
red alert and
You know,
code red.
but you could send messages other than people, Lee County saying, get out, get out, get out, which is basically what they said. We as a city could send, you know, we can't get to you for a week after the storm, because even the governor is saying, we're not gonna attend to you if you don't leave, if you're in an evacuation area. Well, what does that mean? You know, I don't know how many people called for an emergency during the storm, but after the storm, I think people thought, well, we should get a response at some point. Is it gonna be a month later? Is it gonna be a week later? Or does it depend on the damage? I mean, I don't think people were able to assess what their choices were completely.
You bring up a good point with
You
that,
know.
the code red and
Mhm.
the red alert system that the county subscribes to and the city subscribes to. But we've got to get the people to register to do that. That way we can put those messages out as a city, as a community, and you can even direct it, and Lord, you can correct me if I'm wrong, you can direct it to a neighborhood or a
Correct.
geographical area instead of like Bonita Bay's not hit. We're only going to deal with
Exactly.
that area.
Yeah, I think, again, we need to have a systematic evaluation of how we communicate and what we can do in these really tough situations. I mean, we were confronted with something that is really incredible, I think.
And I guess the distress color is white, correct? If you were in the future, you know, something as simple potentially as putting a white towel on your mailbox or letting people know that, you know, when the city goes by, there's distress or there's need of help in somebody's
Correct.
home.
That's a good, you know,
Good, you know,
visual
hopefully
way.
old-fashioned,
Right,
you know.
exactly.
I never thought of that, but I heard that in walking the Quinn Street area, right? Fred?
First of all, this was one heck of a lot bigger flood than what we had in '09. Second of all, we do not have enough people on staff to do all the things that, and I agree with the criticism.
Not criticism.
At the meeting that Greg and I, and I'm trying to remember who else was there, where the people from Lake Salazar and Pinecrest ripped us good because this guy said, I never felt so abandoned in my life. I had medical issues and all that, and nobody was knocking on my door for something like 9 or 10 days. They were inundated with water where they couldn't get out. The simple thing is, unless we're going to double and quadruple the number of people that work in the city and also a big bump in the fire district, we're going to have to do this with things like the fire district has. They didn't call them out, the CERT people. CERT people could have done some of this, not all of it, at least within they're organized by community or blocks or whatever in the city. But I think the city needs to seriously look at creating volunteers, and they're going to have to come from the neighborhoods, like the Quinn Street area, the Dean Street area, Pinecrest, whatever. And we're going to have to come up with a list of things that that we need to have done, like who in your neighborhood needs help, who's on medical, who didn't leave, all that kind of stuff, because we're going to need to be more organized, obviously, for the next disaster. Hopefully, it won't be as big as the one we just had. It's going to take voluntary effort, and I think, like it or not, those of us that happen to have a district that we are elected by, we're going to be in the mix of helping organize. I'm going to help organize the District 6. I may not get it all done, but I'm going to give it a go. And then I'll be happy to share with you what I do, and that may be of help to you. And probably there's no one size shoe that fits all the districts, because they're each different demographics, and some are more HOA, some are a mixture of both. I think 6 has got a lot of neighborhoods, a lot more than I realized till this flood. But anyway, I think that we've got a lot of work to do, and if we don't hit the ground running pretty quick, guess what? It's going to be hurricane season next year, and we will not have learned all we could.
Yeah, no, and, you know, not to dive back into, you know, a discussion point here, but Amy, honestly, as a last resort, I wholeheartedly agree with you, but these people want some answers, and that's what we're all running and gunning hard for. They don't want bureaucracy, they don't want red tape, They don't want to have English translators not understand them at FEMA, which we have rectified, and they need answers. So I know with that in mind, and I just want to feel compelled to say that, we are all moving swiftly, smartly, and we will have an amazing end result as a result of that. So thank you for your hard work. Yes, Steve?
Yeah, Mayor, with all the great things that you've done, there's still that one simple little thing. The governor said evacuate, and a lot of these people will not evacuate, even though they got medical issues. Go with family, local family, do something, but get out of there,
Well, I'd like to address, let me go over, because one of the things I think is that we do need some kind of a, well, let me start at the beginning so I don't forget anything, but these are just things that I would like to have addressed. And I know that Bonita Springs Utilities had a rehash of what they did to try to improve what they did, because they agree with us. You could always do it better. But I was confused in some of the information that came out in regard to the lift stations that are throughout the community. First of all, I sort of knew what lift stations were, but I didn't understand how integrated they were with the electric system. And so I do think that we should work with Bonita Springs Utilities, they're probably already doing this, to understand where the generators are, which ones where there are no generators on lift stations, and how we can improve that in the future. Because when there was a concern that the generators were not pumping them to the proper place, that we needed to be careful about the usage of water. It is my understanding that if you had a failed or a non-electrified lift station, that should only affect the neighborhood in which the lift station is operating. But I could be wrong, so I really do think I'd like to have, and I question why when Florida Power and Light restored power, that we didn't identify these lift stations to be on the high priority to have the electricity put back. I think if you look at our emergency declaration coming out of the Lee County, that was listed as a priority. Did we do it or didn't we do it? And if we didn't do it, let's make sure that the next go around that we know which lift stations need to have electrification as soon as possible. Let me see. And another thing that's kind of a sidebar is that the crisis that we had over gasoline stations. We have a resolution, I think it's our resolution, or maybe it's a state, I don't know, because Audrey passed it around, where there is a requirement that gas stations have generators. But there's all kinds of criteria, whether they're active, when they were put in, how many pumps they have, and everything like that. So I just want to know, did the reason why we didn't have gas in Bonita Springs because they didn't have generators? Were they supposed to have generators? Or should we prioritize electricity to strategic gasoline stations so that when people do want to evacuate, they don't have to go through the horror of saying, I'm going to get stuck on Route 75 without any gas? So I think that needs to be addressed. And then we do need to devise a reasonable method of evacuation. We basically try to evacuate 1/2 to 2/3 of Florida.
Bless you.
That's an impossible situation. And the process by which we were issued the evacuation requests was we did it on the beach. And the people on the beach had some lead time in doing that. When they started to include the ones that were on the bay side, the chaos was already there. No gas, 10 hours on Route 75, no reservations to stay anywhere, no flights out of anywhere, because we tried to get out, and that's what I was faced. And so we finally, because we have a hardened building with supposedly a 20-foot storm surge ability to withstand, we decided to stay. But for people that didn't have that alternative, it was not that unsensible to stay in place. That's my opinion. And that was because of the sequence of what we had people stay in our building that came over from Miami, all right, because they thought that the hurricane, it was like this confluence of problems. So Again, I have a little trouble with saying we all should have left because it wasn't an easy decision. And we have stories about people going to, we don't have a shelter in Bonita, all right? And for people that are 80 years old or 75 years old, it's not that easy to go and sleep on a mat, you know? And they figure I'd rather, whatever, suffer in my home than go there. So we need to rethink that whole thing about sheltering, whether we can have one, where we should go, and how we could facilitate the evacuation. You know, if we had a storm surge, our building would have been, I don't know how the surge, it would probably would have come in and hopefully it would have gone out. But, you know, anyone that's along the bay.
Thank you, Cuba.
You know, would have been, you know.
Never
it
hear me
would have
say
been
that
tough.
before this.
So I think we need to rethink the whole evacuation thing and how we can prepare for it and how we can help our people to evacuate if indeed we start flashing those signs and saying, get out, get out, get out, we're not going to help you. You know, that was basically what happened. So I think I'm finally done. So
Outstanding.
I don't have to talk for another 3 meetings.
That's
Oh,
excellent.
I just want to add.
Please talk in the next 3 meetings.
Well, you cut
Pete?
me off.
I just want to add
Are we
that.
cutting you short? Are we?
Before my friend Frank Valva starts coming after me, St. Leo's actually did a fabulous job in this hurricane as well. People should know that.
For sure.
But-
Council? Yes, Steve.
By the way, transportation, something I didn't even think about, but I heard it on the radio about people forget about Amtrak was available too.
Fred?
Well, one last thing that I think should be brought up, and I want to parse my words carefully.
Here we go.
I think an area that needs to really work as hard as we need to work on doing better next time is the so-called charitable organizations, because you know what? Not much was going on till we were way almost the end of the week, like Friday of the week after of the hurricane. And what really counts with these people that get whacked is, what are you doing for me that next day on Tuesday and Monday? What are you doing for me Wednesday? They're, you know, when help finally gets to them on Tuesday the following week with water and food, they're not real warm and fuzzy about that. So those are things that I think if we work on it now, we're going to have to, regretfully, the city staff and some of us may have to pitch in to make sure that gets done better next time.
Well, on the same token, you keep saying that, and the problem is that it's hurricane season. Way back when hurricane season starts, everybody preaches, and I can show you in the city's plan, the fire department's plan, Lee County's plan, be prepared to have 7 days worth of food and water.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the biggest thing here. As a city, we have to prepare, but as a community and as an individual, you've got to prepare. And I know it's disheartening, but you know what? I sent my family away because I knew where I was going to be. I sent them away on Wednesday, prior to. The mayor did that also. So, I mean, yeah, if you decide to leave the last day or day before, you're going to run into
bills are coming
problems.
in now, too.
But you've got to make that decision prior to. And yeah, it does stink to have to send your family away, or you may have to go somewhere and it doesn't hit here. But it goes back to the old adage, you'd rather be safe than sorry. And yeah, you know, those charitable organizations, they made the decision to evacuate. We weren't happy about it. We dealt with the consequences, but as a community and as individuals, we need to heed that warning. We live in an area that is prone to hurricanes. As Mr. Beaver said, there may be more frequent now because of the climate change. Point being is that we need to be better prepared as a community, as a city, and as individuals, and that's what we're going to work on.
As a little comment, I didn't have any one organization in mind. What I simply said was, we got all these churches, all these charity organizations, and surely there could have been, if we had been better organized, the day after, or certainly the day after the day after, some of them could have been out doing some of the things that people would like to have
Yeah,
happen.
if they were in town, if they didn't heed the warnings that evacuate. And the second part of it is, I think those charitable organizations are doing what they need to be doing right now. This is the long haul. We're a month later and we still have people living in shelters.
I just want to suggest one thing on this, which is we don't have a nickel in terms of a social service budget.
Yes.
In our budget. So we're relying on people, charitable organizations who are volunteers, basically.
Right.
So I would put that in that context. And one other point I would make is we have a county that has $1 billion budget that includes a social service function. So maybe part of the answer is also reaching out as a lesson learned to the county with respect to this place we call Bonita Springs, which is also Lee County. And what responsibility that government, which has the money, which has a social service department, might have here to work with all these great volunteers that we know in all these organizations.
I just, first of all, it wasn't my impression that the social service agency were so late in helping us. I think we had people in here that Carl could relate that, but I don't have a calendar what they came in. But I think there are certain functions that need to be provided, certainly by FEMA or Lee County or the city ahead of time, and one of which is watering stations, powering stations, and comfort stations, and food distribution stations. And some of that stuff is supposed to be provided from FEMA. And I think that's in fact what had happened. That's the entity that provided them initially for the first day or two. And again, I'd have to have a recap from Carl because I didn't focus on the time frame here. But that's an appropriate immediate response. After a certain period of time, now maybe it's 5 days, maybe it's 4 days, that's when the social service agencies should be providing these other things other than the immediate needs so that people don't die, So I don't understand quite what the comment that Councilman Forbes is referring to, because I just didn't get that impression that that was a problem. But I also agree with, it's a good point of Councilman O'Flynn, that Lee County has a responsibility and certainly a budget to come in there and help at least with those initial kinds of needs that are in the community. But again, that all should be asked for and directed from the city. We need to say, we need these things, who's going to do it, who should we call, and blah, 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 blah. It's an organizational administrative issue that, again, hopefully we don't have to do this again, but if we have to, we should take the initiative there to say, we've organized our needs in this way, and this is what we expect, and then make sure that it happens.
Fred?
Okay, FEMA, where were they at? They were still, a lot of them in Texas. When we had the town hall meeting, they apologized for the fact that they were stretched to the breaking point because they were handling Texas, what is it, 6 million people directly affected, hundreds of thousands of homes wiped out. Then you had besides Florida, you had the storm that hit us did affect Puerto Rico and some other possessions. They were there. I think they made the comment that when we got a disaster assessment team, it would be the one that was doing Key West. I don't know if they've ever shown up. Now, to give you a point, having lived in a town that was half destroyed by a killer tornado, the next day they had food wagons and things like that out. And it can be done. I didn't say we couldn't do it. I just said we need to be a little more organized. I think if we had a meeting with the different churches, they all have propane cooking. They would be able to pitch in and have some food centers. And we may have to subsidize it, but all these things are on the table. I didn't say that the people did a terrible job. I just said they didn't, nothing really happened in that end until way late in the week. And people really that need help expect help as soon as they can get it. If somebody calls for an ambulance, they don't expect to wait 5 days to get it. And that's the way they were viewing it, because they were in a house full of water, or they had water so deep in the road they couldn't even get out. So it was a lot worse than anybody thought it would be, but I think the better we organize, the better we can do next time. And I think we can all do better.
Okay, good.
Okay? Yeah. Next point?
I'm done.
You're done. You sure?
Aren't you glad?
Last call?
I'll pipe in later.
Okay.
I think we need to do the rest of the agenda because, as I said, I have to leave at 12:45, and I'm sorry that I went so long.
No, that's okay. That's fantastic. It's great input, Emmy. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so what do we want to do next, team?
Second reading.
Yep, okay. Let's move on to the second reading. Please, thank you.
Thank you. If I may, for the record, Audrey Vance, City Attorney. This is a continuation from
Don't
October.
you have another agenda item?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't have it in front of me. I apologize. I didn't see
We're at
it.
8B.
My mistake, yep.
My mistake, too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
two of our mistakes, but yes.
Fred.
Fred?
Yes, it's basically, I'm going to start this out a little different than I had planned to, but I think it probably needs to be done. Okay. As you all know, we got hit by the hurricane. We have windows of opportunity to get different types of grants. One of them is what's called FEMA Public Assistance Grants. They put an R in front of it. I think it stands for regional, I'm guessing. That clock has started, fortunately, and I didn't know it, but I believe our finance director registered us online for that. That's not a formal application with a scope of work and money and all that. It's like registering with FEMA that you have suffered financial loss, and you'll get back with them with the details. The thing that I was asked to do, I thought, was to try and get us to where we can do the best job we can, reducing flooding. That's the number one objective. There's a lot of, and also just trying to recover, get us back to normal. The first objective, which was the quickest one we could do, was to get something in place with the Regional Planning Council to do what they're doing, which you've met Jim Beaver now twice. He's a wealth of knowledge. He has extensive knowledge of the regulations, how the regulations came about, where the pitfalls are in the regulations, who approves various things when it comes to stormwater management and all that. Now, as part of that, and I had said it when we approved that initial effort with Regional Planning Council, Jim Beaver, was I said that we would be more than likely needing to add an engineering component to work for the city with Jim Beaver on these initiatives, because many of the solutions tend to be an engineered solution as opposed to restoring the river so it can breathe or flood better without restrictions and all that. What we did, Jim Beaver, myself, Matt Feeney, I don't know if Matt is here. Raise your hand, Matt, are you here? Oh, good.
That man with the whiskers back there.
Right, yeah, the man.
Might not
Noah,
recognize him.
Noah. So anyway, we talked collectively about the need to have an engineering component. I talked with Audrey, and Audrey quickly pointed out that we could not just go and pick one, even if they went to work through RPC, Regional Planning Council, or we contracted them directly, because they're a governmental entity and they're bound to follow the same statutes as we follow. And basically, for what she recommended, or said, I think it was not recommended, the only way we could do it, I think was more the way she put it, was as long as we did not exceed for services $35,000, we could pick anyone, that was a lawfully recognized engineering firm. So we had a choice. We could have just gone out and gone for one, but no. Matt, Matt and I primarily, because Jim was tied up working on the other stuff. Remember, that's a one-man operation doing the real work. I'm not saying he doesn't have backup up there, but it's he that we're buying the services of. We developed a list of 3 firms we wanted to talk to. They're in the green sheet. One was Structural Point. One was Arcadius, I believe is the way you pronounce it. Their corporate headquarters, interestingly enough, is Rotterdam. And so we thought that would, and they have offices in Florida. And then the last one was Adkins, who is a huge engineering firm that's also in Florida and nationally recognized. We wrote a scope of work, which was 1 page, and that was developed by myself, by Jim Beaver, and Matt Feeney. That we talked to people on Friday about, could we talk to you on Monday by Skype? And we did send them Friday, the 3 firms, the links to the drone flyover footage that we did. And by the way, all of them gave us high marks that we had the presence of mind to do that, because they said it would be very useful in establishing damages with FEMA and other people, how extensive the flooding was. So then we sent the scope of work Monday midday, about 10 o'clock to them, and we said, here's what we want you to look at being able to do. Here's the scope of work for Regional Planning Council. We interviewed them by Skype, and it was a very interactive. It wasn't a formal where they're selling. We asked them questions like, what experience have you had in working on aftermaths of flooding, also working on long-term solutions. We asked them about grants and all that. And interestingly, 2 of the firms that we talked to had people working with FEMA right now. They were already retained by cities to help them make sure that they got their fair share of these public assistance grants. And then there's another kind of grant that kicks in about 6 months after the flood. They both made a valid point. They said, you know what? The other communities that we're working for tended to be smaller communities, and you can debate whether we're small or big or medium size. But they said the reason that they were brought in, and they said it was a valid point, if you're not careful, the bigger population areas will get the juice. And you need somebody advocating, and Beaver is going to be doing the same thing. But this...
Fred, to that point, could I just ask quickly,
Yes.
how heavy will they look at that? Apparently it's documented that the city of Bonita Springs was the 3rd hardest hit community in the state of Florida.
They will look at that very well, or very heavy. And the other thing, speaking to some of the constructive criticism, they said it's critically important that we have the best documented case of how badly we were hurt from the floods, as well as the hurricane winds itself. And I did ask them, both of them, about the old thing that we went through and kind of, I don't want to say we had a debate, but a discussion about that most of the trailer homes and the modular homes in this community have what's called the enclosed Florida room. You call it a great room, whatever, and all that. And I said, we're told that FEMA will not count that, especially if that Florida room is on a trailer that's in a 100-year floodplain. Some of our parks are, some are not. Citrus Park is 500 years, so it's not in that. They did say that they believed that since that was so extensive, that we should have a count on those, because they said you can even put a footnote by it and say this was a slab-on grade, whatever. You can have another footnote that says this one was in a 100-year floodplain, this one was in a 500, whatever. They said the more you can show FEMA as well as the other entities, because they're not only working to help the cities on FEMA, but they're working with anybody, including the state or elected officials. We're working with.
Fred,
Excuse
can I,
me, Fred,
oh, go ahead, Amy,
I
yes.
have a fundamental question here that isn't
Yes.
related to the methodology that you used to select the firm, which seems perfectly apparent and fine, and I don't have any issues with that process. Is I don't understand, or maybe I misunderstood when we had the study agreement with Mr. Beaver. The time that we're having this engineering services being contracted for, because it was my thought that once Mr. Beaver came up with some suggestions, that we would choose some, and then we would have the engineering study done at that point. I don't understand why this is coming forward now, or how it's going to integrate with the projects that are going to be presented to us at some time in the near future. It seems like this is getting the cart before the horse, because I thought council wanted to have input into what projects we wanted to go forward with in what time frame. So that's my question.
And
Okay,
secondary to that, I just find it a little disturbing that we had a meeting last week and we heard nothing about this, and this has all come about in the last, couple days. I
Right.
mean, it's not the norm of the way we do things.
Right.
When we did the quadrant study, when we were doing the multimodal, we interviewed the firms, we got their presentations, and now none of us has seen this at all.
Right.
And I don't know what the
Now,
rush is.
So, first of all, let me answer Amy's question. Some of the things the firms will do, beside trying to help us with grants that we're put in for, they will also be making suggestions that Mr. Beaver may want to consider as well. The second thing is that some of these suggestions that he's coming up with, they will help us develop a better cost estimate. Because right now, you've got just this is a best guess of Fred Forbes and Matt Feeney. In fact, Jim doesn't even participate in that because he's not a cost person. Now, getting to the point about why do this now, we need to have an engineer involved in this. In fact, when I told Mr. Theriak, our special counsel, what we were doing, the only comment he had was, we need to have an engineer involved in the situation early. The only way we can get an engineering firm involved in it early is just as we are proposing to do. Did I know I was going to do this last Wednesday? I didn't. Now, you can believe that or you don't have to. I don't care. I did not. I knew we had to do it, and we were talking on Thursday, I think Matt and I don't remember, I think we were, and then we talked to Jim, and we decided, hey, let's get this thing going. Sooner is better. Time is of the essence. So.
And then we can
Now- and
load
there-
it up with bureaucracy on the other side, but
Yeah.
there are people that need results.
And
They
there are
need
already,
answers.
and there are already cities that have got people like this on the payroll working on their behalf. Now, in addition to that, we had one other thing we tried that we wanted to do. We wanted to end up with an engineering firm that did not primarily make their livelihood from developments in this area. So that's why the one firm was headquartered in Indianapolis, so that's pretty remote. The other one, their headquarters is Rotterdam, although they have 5 or 6 offices. That's Arcadius. And then the other firm has a big office in Florida, but they do all kind of work more like we're talking about. They do work for developers, but not in this area. We thought that was important. Now, let's assume that this goes forward. The way it will work is that between Mr. Beaver and the engineering component, first of all, we're trying to come up with an additional proposed line item or two in that legislative initiative that will speak to what council made abundantly clear. We want to make sure that every troubled, flooded area in the city gets a proper look-see and a study of that area by itself. And you're not going to get that in this first thing. There isn't enough money to do it. You know, you could take one area probably and do it really good for the kind of money that we're going to spend. But you're not going to get all of these hot spots, troubled areas, the ones that flooded, some of which there was an area that I didn't even realize had flooded. It was over in the IBE area, but it was a bit north. Matt took us through that on Monday. So the way it would work, we would do this very shortly. We'll develop a work scope that just is a very generic kind of thing. It says, well, we're looking for engineering firms that would be able to analyze a flooded neighborhood, number one. Number two, possibly develop a new storm drainage system if they don't have one, or assess what needs to be done to restore the drainage system in a community that has kind of not maintained it. A whole shopping list of possibilities. That would be advertised very shortly. Council would see the ad, see the scope. You can add to it and diminish it as you so want to do. It would go out and we would get letters of interest. Then we would kind of squeeze that down into a group of people, firms, that when we have projects, we don't have to mess around for 90 days getting to a contract award. Council can be involved if you want in the selection of a given firm to do a project or several projects if you so choose. Or you could say, well, we want to listen to the last 2 or 3 that get squeezed down from a big list that big.
Excuse me, Councilman Forbes, you have lost me.
Pardon?
You've lost me. This last conversation that you had, is this in addition to what you're proposing here?
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not, you couldn't get any of these projects designed for the kind of money
So you're
that we're.
talking about design. Well, I still.
What I'm talking.
I would like to have a clarification of how the work that Jim Beaver is doing is integrated with your proposal today and would be finally integrated with the last comment that you made in regard to a process by which we identified specific projects. I don't get that.
All right.
Sounds like we're hiring a firm to get the firm.
Yeah, I mean, I really want to understand that better. I don't
Okay,
understand.
I think what you've asked, I'll try it again.
Drill down on the bottom line.
I'm going to try, but I gotta make sure I may be drilling down on the wrong hole. I don't know.
Just the facts,
But
man.
anyway, the firm that we've picked, Adkins and Mr. Beaver, will be working together to develop the strategies, both the near term, the midterm, and the long term, that would be presented to City Council for approval or rejection or modification. Now, let's just say for the heck of it that it looks like the line item where we would have each of the real troubled areas of the city studied individually by an engineering firm or firms. That would be done in this other piece that I said, that we're not going to be obligated to anybody when we advertise this. There will be a keywords in there that says something like this: that as a result of this advertisement, that we may issue one or more than one contract. So that gives you the right to go with brand A to do this project and brand B to do a different one, and so forth. There is no obligation to anything by doing this. If you don't do it, you're going to sit for 90 days after you pretty well know that you've got a project that's going to be approved for funding. And if you want to do that, that's fine. I don't think the people that are upset with us because we can't give them answers are going to like that approach. But that's, now, if,
See, I envisioned that we would go from the work that came out of Jim Beaver's effort directly to that final point that you are. I don't understand this middle place.
and if you do it, let's say, first of all, Jim will tell you he does need an engineering firm to do some of the things, not all the things, but some of the things. It'll be done better if we have an engineering component. Jim was part of the selection group of Matt
Yeah,
and
the
I.
selection is not a problem for me. It's just what we're doing here and what,
Well,
and
and
how
in-
much, how much more effort we're going to make to identifying the projects before we get to the point where we have a project.
This is it. If we add this component and we let Mother Nature take its process, then at the end of 90 days, probably 60 days, probably even another 30 days, you're going to start knowing projects. And then the next thing is, do they get funded? And then if they don't get funded, the city does have a choice that we could dig into what little funds we have left and self-fund the more critical ones that we really feel need to be done. But if we don't do this, we're not going to have done this first step as good as we should. Secondly, if we don't advertise that generic thing, we're going to sit for 90 days till we can get firms shortlisted and selected. So
I think Fred had in his original green sheet, pretty sure I remember it, the concept of the engineer.
Yes, but I didn't, he did.
Yeah, I did.
No, it didn't. I'm reading it right now. It
What do you
says,
say?
sub-consultants may be necessary.
correct.
Okay, well,
Didn't
there you
say
go.
engineer.
All right, well,
And when
engineer.
Mr. Beaver was here, he never alluded to an engineer.
So-
And it says,
Excuse me.
once underway.
Go ahead. Go
It's
ahead.
not even underway. I just have a problem that if you even say it was done on Thursday, the procedural is, you've got a hold of 3 people, 3 engineering firms, reviewed them, selected them, called the attorney, Mr. Theriak, all within less than 3 days. Friday, well, let's exclude weekends. Friday, Monday, Tuesday. And have it on a green sheet today as an errata. Second part of it is, I think months ago, you brought it up about calling the attorney on their own. And now I hear today that you've called the attorney, which is more added expense to
Actually,
this.
I didn't call Mr. Theriak. I called him when we were talking, Audrey and I were talking about, and I think John Domer, on another subject, and I just happened to mention to him what we were doing, moving out with RPC
Semantics.
to informing,
Semantics.
and he said that he thought it was fine, but it would be nice if we had engineering in it, and I said it would be our intention to add it in. And even though in the green sheet it said sub-consultants, in the discussion that we had, I did say it would be engineers. You know.
But that's
I'm just
where it
thinking
was.
a week ago when we approved this,
Mhm.
if you knew that we were gonna do a subcontractor and engineering, why wasn't then? And why wasn't the rest of us privy to selecting this? When McMahon was approved, when, whoever else was approved through the quadrant or through the Beach Road, we all were in that.
Okay, two things. It was approved 2 weeks ago, wasn't a week ago. Second thing is, the situation that we are living in today is not what we were living in when McMahon was hired, when Tool Design was hired, when this CPZ, and there's a good example. Look at that. We picked them way back in, when was that, June or July?
Right.
And we're just now going to get a proposal to maybe critique from them to lead to a contract.
Oh, Alta, you mean?
Now,
Yeah.
you know what? That may be good enough for that. Truthfully, I don't think it was. But we cannot be doing the things that way on this flooding thing, because the people, the community do not expect that kind of wait and see.
I'm not saying wait and see, but do it the right procedural way, is what I'm saying.
This was perfectly legal and right.
Legal and right is
I
one
could have
thing.
picked, we could have picked one, not
you mean
even
you.
talked to
You
three.
mean you, not we. Don't say we.
No, I could have, to recommend to you. I didn't say I've picked it, it's a contract, it's here for your approval. If you
Can I
don't want
step
to
in?
approve it.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
Pete,
fine.
please.
Because I want to agree with Greg, I want to agree with Fred. No,
Yeah.
no. Actually, I have a totally different take on this, which is, again, thank you, Fred Forbes, for hopping on this.
All these different takes on hard issues. It's a common
Yeah,
theme. So
yeah.
just,
And-
and I would
and-
just remind everybody as
Oh,
I
I'm sorry.
as I interrupt you,
yeah.
Peter, for us not to interrupt each other. So as I interrupted you, no. But moving forward with each other as we have this dialogue.
think we
Yeah,
have.
you know, well,
Okay.
we have a few times, but we're good as I interrupted you.
So I have a totally different take on it, which is Fred has hopped on this. If there ever were an emergency in the history of Bonita Springs, this is the emergency. We have, because of the actions in the past, not to go back on that again, been put in a flat-footed mode. So we have to move. We have to move, okay? It's an emergency. So that explains to me Greg's point, the difference between what you would call normal and customary, and I would agree with you, but not illegal. So far from it, totally legal. And thank God he's doing it, and thank God for Matt and Beaver for sitting down with him, I guess, from what he explained. Second point is, we clearly need an engineer working with Jim Beaver. I already, and this is not you, Greg, but I've already had the Paved Paradise crowd mumbling out there, oh, Jim Beaver's not an engineer. Jim Beaver's not an engineer. You know, I'm sure you've gotten, I don't know if you have.
No, I have, but-
All right. So that's that Greek chorus, okay? We clearly need an engineer working with Beaver. You see all the knowledge he has about the watersheds, but what I hear Fred, I think and to Amy's question, I think what I hear Fred saying is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Fred, that we need somebody to work with Beaver to help identify and scope individual things and work with him side by side as an engineer. Then I think I hear him saying that coming out of that will come a more, what you might call regular, Greg, process with respect, is that right? With
Right,
respect
yeah.
to choosing, because there are going to be a lot of projects here. Hopefully, there darn well better be. So I just disagree respectfully. All I can say is this amount of work done that quickly, my reflection is thank you. It's not why are you out there doing that. I'm just sorry I disagree on that.
It's not a matter of why. I have certain rules in life, and Rule 39 is there's no such thing as coincidences. If we knew this ahead of time, we should have approved it ahead of time. You've said, like you said, Jim Beaver's not a engineer. Fred has said it 2 or 3 times, and whether it was said or not, his thing, we need an engineer. Why wasn't that considered before?
I think
to me, it just seems like we keep nickeling and diming. Here's 50,000 here, now here's 35,000. Whether or not illegal or not, it's a little shady that Fred is the only one that.
Point of order.
Okay,
I
not
got-
shady. I'm sorry. I'm a little disturbed that I didn't see those
Okay.
things.
Yeah.
I'm a little upset with that. Just like when I asked the question 3 weeks ago about who this mystery man was, I got elusive answers. And I don't think with all the things that came up earlier with Mr. Fitzgerald and Mr. Reichenthal, or Richfield now, rather, about being in the sunshine, that disturbs me a little bit. That when asked the question, who is coming in, and then you can, well, I don't want to say right now. To me, that is not transparent. And the same thing, here's 3 firms that were looked at, not by any one of us, not even a courtesy email that we're looking at this. When you sent your emails that Kathy got, these are things that was discussed. That's the problem I have, is that the not sharing of information. And I think that to make an educated decision on Atkins versus SharePoint versus Arcadius, I don't have that information. Yes, Fred is a wealth of knowledge also, but Mike may see something that Amy doesn't see. And that's the point that I have on this whole thing. Yes, it needs to be done. I will support it wholeheartedly. I just don't like being left in the dark and getting this 4 or 5 days in advance. And I'd like to be part of the selection
Amy and then,
process.
I'm sorry, Greg.
I
Yeah,
just
Amy
like
and
to-
then Fred.
Well, 2 points. Mayor, it's interesting about the interruption. I don't sense that there's interruption between us. I think it's good to have a more conversational discussion about some of these kinds of things, so that sometimes it doesn't help to have the interaction when we have to, put up our hands or whatever we got to do. Because again, if we could just look
Should
at
have
each
been
other.
here, should have been here last council.
If we could just look, if we could just look at each other and see.
If you think
when-
I run a tight
when-
ship.
see when- well, it's just a different. There's certain topics that I think require more collegial interaction. That's just an aside. From what I sense from what Councilman DeWitt is saying is, I do think we could have more communication. You know, I agree with that. I'm going to support this, but I would really think it would be helpful, and I think having Jim Beaver here to even discuss that the Bloomberg thing was very helpful to me, because I got a better picture than I had in any of the discussions we had. I would ask him to come back and talk to us a little bit more at our next meeting to explain to us just how the process is working. I still think I would feel more comfortable with this if council had an opportunity to at least know which specific areas of suggestions that are coming out of the Beaver study are going to be addressed by the engineers, or what areas does he need help with. It can't be for everything that's coming out of the Beaver study. Otherwise, we should have just hired the engineer directly and not Beaver. I mean, I'm saying that kind of skeptical, you know, well, what's the word? You're just facetiously. But is there any way that we could get some input from Jim Beaver to say, yes, I would like them to work on A, B, and C, because I think he's kind of the guru. He's directing this study and this project development, and I really think that would help. And I agree with you. We should have at least been given some heads up about what was coming. I know we have these last-minute erratas, but if we're going to have an errata, we try to do it a little bit earlier, or give some preliminary email just with the information, and then we don't respond, because it is hard to just get it at the last minute. And when I saw this last night, it upset me for a different reason, because I didn't have enough time to address it as thoroughly as I would like. And I do think that I appreciate all the things that Councilman Forbes is doing, but I would ask him to work on the communication with the other council members, and I think we would all feel a lot better. All the other things you're doing are great. I think we could have some help here.
Council? Yes, Fred.
Well, I'd like to make 3 or 4 points here. I agree with much of the criticism. I'll accept that. I made a conscious decision. Do we go for this Wednesday, or do we go for next Wednesday? Now, here we are. We've been given an additional amount of time on our legislative initiative. But the difference between a week and not getting them going, I chose to go the way I went. Now, that may have been an error in judgment. Secondly, I think that the big thing that Jim Beaver would add to, let's say the situation was reversed. We hired an engineering firm first and then hired Beaver. What Beaver brings to the table that's unique, that any of the engineering companies that you would hire don't have in general, is the historical knowledge that Jim Beaver brings to the table. That historical knowledge, besides his knowledge of water, hydrology, and how the flowways work, and how the 3 or 4 watersheds got all messed up, that is very pertinent to the work that the engineering firms are going to do. It's a good fit. Now, to address your complaint about we need to have more communication, I need everyone to give me their best shot on a day and a time of the week that you're available, because what I'm going to do is post like a 1-hour meeting in room 118, or we could do it in here, where those council people that are interested in asking what's going on can come in and ask, and the public can be there, so probably I imagine some of the first ones will be here. And I think periodically Jim Beaver will be on the phone. I've talked to Jim about coming down. He is going to be here next Wednesday. That was in this green sheet, unless it got removed in the editing. He will be here next week. He's come, in fact, he said so today, but I had asked him that, and I said, a couple things we're interested in is, one is, what is your initial thoughts and observations? Remember, he's only been on the job for 2 weeks. Then secondly, what is his thoughts on the legislative initiative, more thought, an opportunity for council to ask some questions. He does enjoy hearing from the public with their observations about the flood. Now, and I'm just going to digress for a second, and then hopefully we can call the question. What happened Monday, besides the finishing up the scope of work and getting it to the 3 people that were going to be interviewed, then Jim and I and Matt Feeney went out and did an initial, not an initial because he's been there before, but we went together and we looked at the Dean Pierce area. In fact, a little sidebar, we met the lady that's the wife of the husband, that the 2 of them own the big lot that goes from the bridge over to the chain link fence from Dean Street all the way to the river. And she's wants to talk to us, but she said this isn't the day for it. So we did meet her. Matt's got her name and phone number and all that. So that's on the books. We then went from there. We went to an area that was a neighborhood I hadn't been in exactly that did have a lot of damages to it. Homes apparently did have flooding because we saw piles of furniture and mattresses. Wasn't extensive, but I'm going to say probably 8 or 10 homes appeared to have stuff stuck out. From there, we went over and we went down into Pinecrest area. And we were just looking at, and Jim was making interesting observations about, well, you know, this area here has got no drainage ditches at all. And so it just, that was, in fact, several of those we went in. From there, we went over to Lake Salazar,
Yeah.
and went through it, and we were looking, among other things, the water was down, and we were looking at the berm, and the berm would be maybe one area, the height of this rail out here, and in other areas it was down probably 1.5 feet, and there was a swale, and periodically the swale by the berm, on the other side of the berm, was filled in. We think what happened is part of the berm got washed into it at some time. We went all through there. Then we also went through Morton Grove, and it was more just making interesting observations. No conclusions were reached at all, just observation. One of the problems that was pointed out with Morton Grove was that, you know, they want to pump, and South Florida Water Management will approve them for pumping, but where can you pump the water that it doesn't make somebody else's lot more difficult? We even went over and looked at where that one of the culverts goes under I-75. We talked about that. We talked about the fact there needed to be a different drainage system on the west side of I-75. It seems like somehow they forgot it, and that's causes part of the problem with Pinecrest. So all those things happen. So
Well, that's, I just want to interject. I think this is really good information, and that this should be something that's provided to the council in a report of some sort. But in the same, and it's good that you focused on the damaged part, but one area that I had like to speak to in your green sheet is that I would like to have a definitive mechanism by which people who have problems could interact with Jim Beaver. You said he wants to hear anecdotally what happened, and I know you said he's going to be there earlier to our meeting, but that's not a good way to communicate to the community their ability to have some input into work he's doing. We have to devise a better way of doing it. If it's by email, we need to distribute his email and say, if you have something you want to relate to Jim Beaver because he's reviewing the whole entire stormwater management system for the city, that they have to do it, because just to have it in a green sheet, who's even going to read that, you know? It's, and I agree that we should focus on the most damaged area, but the report you're giving needs to be, that should be part of Jim Beaver's report. I mean, that's what we're paying him for.
yeah, I would agree with you.
know.
But if he spends all his time writing reports, that goes against, you're on a 90-day clock. You're really on a 30 to 60-day clock. We can have a situation where we could have a, what do you call it, a workshop where the public's invited in, they can make comments. We might do 2 of them in a day, one in
Can
the
I make a
morning, one in
suggestion?
the afternoon.
Sorry, I'm interrupting.
You are interrupting. Go right ahead. I think it's a good time to interrupt.
Look, we have next Wednesday's meeting.
Right.
If we dedicate that to only the hurricane, no bicycles, no bicycles.
Yeah.
At that meeting, maybe that's the time and place. Jim's going to be here. Public will be here.
Thank you, Peter.
And I think we need to publicize it as
So
much
mote
as
it
we
be.
can.
Is
I
that
think-
how you say it
I
correctly?
think we need to get the word out, especially to the originally main flooded, affected areas.
Okay.
You know.
Should we move the
But I
question?
agree with everything everybody's saying.
Okay, so how do we want to proceed, Fred?
Well, I'd like
What
to
would you
ma-
like to do?
I'd like to
moved.
make a motion that we award a contract, when I say that the firm of Atkins Engineering be approved by city council for a contract not to exceed $35,000, but I'd like to have the flexibility that it may be under RPC, it may be quicker and easier to do it that way, or it may be a separate contract with the city. It's-
Second the motion.
Yeah.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second. Is there further discussion?
Yeah, just
Greg?
point of clarification. With the Jim Bieber thing, is that through Jim Bieber solely or the RPC?
RPC.
All right, because before you said our contract's with Jim.
Well, it's fraudulent.
I'm just
slip.
saying.
Yeah, very good
That's
point.
next week.
Okay, further discussion, Amy?
Is it possible for when they do their work that we would get an a priori look at the different projects that he's working on? The engineer?
You mean, what things the engineers?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I'd
I
like to
think
know
that-
ahead of time, and I hope that that would be integrated with some kind of a report from Jim Beaver before they start doing their work.
Well, I think
I
on the,
don't want an open-ended engineering
no,
for everything.
let me say this. A $35,000 engineering contract is not a very big number, and I think we're gonna have to pick and choose how we spend that money.
Wow.
I think a couple of the areas of the, like one of the areas that
Can
we
we
were gonna.
suggest maybe that would be for next Wednesday?
Yeah.
Yes.
That would be laid out,
But
preliminary
but
ideas?
can
Yeah,
we,
we
s-
could, we could
that
give
make
it a
sense?
go, yeah.
when we
yeah.
approve this contract, could we have the condition that it would be integrated with some specific specificity to the council before they get working on any specific project? Is that appropriate or not?
We've got to.
In general, yeah, if it's an emergency thing, we may have to do what we do, but I don't envision an emergency, but you never know.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman Gibson,
Aye.
Councilman Forbes,
Aye.
Councilwoman Caramba,
Are we voting it with the condition or not the condition?
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yes, we're voting it
With
with
the
the condition.
conditions.
Aye.
Councilman Dewitt,
Aye.
Councilman
Aye.
Slakta, Mayor Simmons.
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn.
Aye. Real quick point.
Yes, Peter.
We had talked about the Water Management District being here today. Is there anything happening with that?
You know, we're going to try to get them here next week. We learned of the conflict with the delegation meeting today. They
Right.
were there and
Right.
not here.
Right, right.
We're going to try to get them next week.
Okay.
For the hurricane discussion.
Second is something very important that was in the middle of the last one, and it was mentioned by Ann Wright, thoughtfully signed us up, and that is we clearly need a real initiative. We need to get on top of every aspect of where we can get money from FEMA and others. And the question is how we're doing that. That's the question. So I see you said these guys, Atkins, have some experience in that, but I do think, not for today, but I think maybe it's another green sheet, maybe it's Atkins, I don't know, maybe it's somebody else, maybe it's staff, whatever. We need to make sure that we're on top of that. It's obviously too much to expect that Carl would be, I mean, we haven't been through this before. There seems to be a line of, how can I put it, a line of work there that people are accessing. Carl?
Yes, sir. Great question. So we do want to let the council know that We have retained the firm of J.R. Evans Engineering.
Right.
And they are our FEMA consultants.
FEMA consultant.
So they are working with us. We've already had multiple meetings with them. They are telling us what FEMA's expectations are with regards to documentation for our requests. And their job is going to be making sure that's all lined up and also to be our advocates with FEMA on our funding requests. Now, I know you're probably asking about funding beyond FEMA, and certainly we are interested in a
Even
number of
FEMA,
those.
so for example, I went on, I said to myself, I don't think Houston's probably telling everybody to get out of here. So I went on, I just Googled Houston, and they've got a whole city, I mean, they got a little more resource than we do in the city of Houston. And they have a whole storm recovery website, and you know, one of the things I saw that actually predated the hurricane there was what they call it's a grant system from FEMA, Home Elevation Grant Program. All right, and from what I could gather just from watching the videos, this is, remember the thing we had 2 weeks ago where Margaret Worsley had noticed that thing and we put the money in quickly for Spring Creek? It sounds like that was a FEMA program that they have annually put in for, and it's big bucks, and it's for for raising homes up. Sorry. So my question is, like, we clearly need somebody to be telling us, meaning staff, advising us. These are all the possibilities. This is how people go get the money. This is what people get, and here's how they go get it, as opposed to just responding to what our requirements are with respect to FEMA. I see Arlene must be, what is that?
Yeah, Arlene?
Yeah.
We've got two systems going on right now.
All right.
We have J.R. Evans, which is our CRS consultant. You might be familiar with Jim Vonstein as well as
Right.
Lori Lear.
Jim Von Rintown?
Von Rintown, yes, correct.
Yeah, know him well.
So they have been coordinating with us on folks needing the substantial damage, substantial investment, improvement aspect. Additionally, Ann Wright in the Finance Department has been working with Adjusters International, who is doing the assessment on city facilities and the city being reimbursed through FEMA from the outlay that we have done pre-storm, post-storm, as well as, you know, looking at what can be used as match for the items that the city has done. We're also continuing to work with Margaret Worsel when we see opportunities as well. We want to present those as well. But it would be an opportunity to continue talking with J.R. Evans to see having someone spending the time to communicating to us when these opportunities, because unfortunately they come quickly sometimes.
Well, that's my concern.
And sometimes you get a very short lead time with them as well. What we did find out with this last one is that is an annual opportunity. The extension was given for that grant because of the effects of Hurricane Irma. They did provide an extension. But we can still continue to get consulting with J.R. Evans. We might want to talk with them a little bit further, as well as Adjusters International and others, to see that we're making sure we get all of our resources.
All right, so just to be clear, my view is staff is improperly preoccupied with the real work of the damage that's going on right now. And I'm just concerned that that there are other towns, it sounds like you've heard some of it, that there are other towns and other cities that are also already steps ahead of us, not because of any lack of work that staff could do, but because somebody's not being tasked to say, no, it's not just like the good work you're talking about, it's tell us what the whole pie is, and then we can figure out whether we can go after slices of that pie.
Fred?
Well, two things. I think it's critically important that we weave in J.R. Evans with the people that we've just hired, and well with Beaver, because we want to make sure all this is coordinated together. But secondly, because Deputy Mayor Flynn mentioned the magic word, South Florida Water Management District, I was going to bring this up, and I'm going to do it right now. They have advertised, it's not just happened, but it's been advertised for quite a while. They call it surplus lands that either fronts on Bonita Grande as well as...
You know what, Fred, and I'm sorry to do this. Peter, will you finish up with your items?
Yeah, I
and
just
then we're
wonder
going
if
to
I just
go
wait
around the
if we
horn
could
and wrap
first,
this up.
First, stay on the topic of what.
You just finished with your,
yeah.
why don't you finish with
well,
your items?
Well, no, that's it. Does
Okay.
council agree on that?
Yeah.
Yes.
I
Nodded
agree.
the heads, yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Anything else?
And then, well, it's out of, let me just cover this quick. Carl, I'd still like to get the ANC, we got a memo from staff was helpful in terms of what we're currently paying for the ANC fee, which is nothing, to keep it in place. But I would still like the historical numbers that started, I believe, when we bought Bamboo Village, and it was through a period of time, somewhere around 11 or 12. It was so much a year. I think you had mentioned last time you thought it was 40,000. So what do we have in effect? Have we invested in the maintenance of those fees? That's all. Just quick, somebody asked about the Army Corps. That was a meeting Greg and Fred and I were on, and that was actually, it turned out to be more than the Army Corps. It was another part of FEMA. And the whole world was on there, towns and municipalities from all over Southwest Florida, from more than Southwest Florida. It was on the southern part of the state. And they were simply, these organizations, which are federal government organizations, were looking from and got input from us, in essence, about how we were damaged. So that was what that was. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Mike? Fred?
Yeah, before I jump back to what I was going to say, as part of that conversation, and Jim Beaver was on that call too.
Oh, that's right.
But in there, he was representing Collier, Everglades City, and other places,
He did a
and
good job.
we
And
were
Bonita
all,
Springs, it
we
sounds
were
like.
exceedingly impressed about how well he knew the damages of Everglades City and Collier County and all that. And then
Put a picture in for us.
the comment was made, well, we ought to find out. So I wrote him an email and said, hey, where'd you get all this information? Which I shared with council, his reply. But his reply was that Collier broke out their damage assessment by, they got it broken down by cities and areas and all that, where Lee just lumped everything in. So we were not able to get stuff for Bonita out of that, was what I got. Now, going to the other thing that I was going to bring up, there's this surplus land of South Florida Water Management. They've said that it doesn't fit within their project area anymore, and they're considering it surplus. Now, that land all had 1 to 1.5 foot of water standing on it during our flood, still has water standing on it. In fact, the part that would face out on Bonita Grande was that area where there was a lot of sheet flow, sometimes almost impassable, going from that side of the road across into Pine Lake Preserve, or Reserve, or whatever. And so my thought is this, and Jim Beaver, this is a Jim Beaver thought, so I guess that'll give it more credibility. He said, we should ask South Florida Water Management to take it off the market and seriously consider turning those properties over to the city so we could use those properties to store more water. And it's a good idea, and I don't think they had a lot of money in it. I don't know how long they've owned it, but that's a thought. If you want to do it, I would suggest we make a motion to that effect.
I'd second the motion.
For a letter.
Okay, there's been a motion made and a second. And Fred, wrapping
And the
up?
letter would be signed by the mayor, as usual.
Great.
We could
Further
also-
discussion on this point?
No, it's good, except that, would it be better to keep it with South Florida Water Management, and have them do a water project there? Do they do those kinds of things? Rather than we take it over?
Just ask them not to sell it.
And
That's
then,
surplus.
I think we should just ask them not to sell it and to consider it for water retention. And then we could decide who's gonna do it and who's gonna pay for it.
Yeah, we could do that. That was my first inclination, and Jim Beaver said, no, we should ask for it. So
Well, we
I'm
could always-
quoting him. That's too bad
I
he's
would
not
ask for
here.
it.
But
Well, and I don't think they were looking to sell it. I know there's a second, so under discussion, I mean, I'm just reading the letter that Carl sent out, that they're not looking to sell them outright. They're looking to trade it like to the crew or somebody else that says that. I mean, the way I took this thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we want to.
Yeah, I agree with Fred Forbes. Sorry, Greg.
No, I'm just looking to save some money that we can use for another project.
The notion they would give it to us.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
crew wouldn't do
Yeah.
water retention, though.
Crew doesn't, yeah, they're government lands.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Any further discussion?
They just manage it.
Roll call, please.
Councilman Forbes,
Yes.
Councilwoman
Aye.
Caramba, Councilman DeWitt,
Aye.
Councilman Slackett, Mayor Simmons,
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn,
Aye.
Councilman Gibson.
Aye.
Okay, Amy, anything? We're going around the horn for council member items.
Aren't we
Well,
done?
on this stuff.
Yeah, on this stuff.
Just in regard to funding, and I can't remember what it is, but Lee County has asked for some, not Lee County, Collier County has asked for some money for housing that, I don't know the program, but it was in the paper recently that it was an annual program that they were able to get some funding for. So once I figure in all my papers, I could give you the reference, unless you know it already.
It's CG,
I believe
yeah.
it might be community development block grants.
Right.
We have previously committed our community development block grants to the bicycle pedestrian
But
pathways.
there's supposed to be surplus funds. What do I understood it? They weren't all for this initiative, something initiative, I can't remember it. And it was an additional request that they made for housing, at least
Could it have been the state
partnership,
housing
yeah,
ini-
housing initiative,
the
yeah.
state partnership, yes.
It was at state, or I thought it was?
It's SHIP is a state program.
Okay, well, anyway, can we do that too, is my
Well,
question?
what we could do is contact our contract coordinator with Lee County Community CDBG, which I believe also is Human Services with Lee County, and talk about the SHIP funds as well. I believe Lee County might be doing an administrative process to change some of their CDBG funds to provide housing assistance. What that definition of the housing assistance is,
Right.
I'm not sure of yet, whether that's rent abatement or temporary housing.
Well, but
I don't know.
let's explore it, because why don't, if that's available, we're gonna probably need something, and let's see if we can use it.
As additional money,
As
As
additional money,
So,
yeah.
yes.
not replacing.
No,
Correct.
not replace. It was not my understanding that it was replacement. It was
So
some
what I want
kind
to
of.
clarify, the information I had received from Lee County is they were doing change orders to some of
Okay.
their projects. That was not what I heard, but I'd be happy to look at what you have from Collier County to see what they were exploring
Yeah.
and ask Lee County about those opportunities.
Yeah,
But
okay.
the SHIP program is a
That's
state
correct.
program
That's what it is.
administrated through Lee County.
Right. Okay.
One quick thing I had circulated the council information about the Water Management District projects for water retention structures that exist throughout the entire South Florida Water Management District, other than in Bonita Springs. So it'd be great to have their brain power at work, working with us on more than snagging the river.
Correct.
Okay. Amy, anything else?
No, I think I'm done. Thank you.
Greg?
No, the only thing I want to say is, have everybody look at their email. There's 2 resolutions that the county put out there about the RPC, so, you know, RPC is under some fire right now, legislatively and locally, so. We're still waiting on a ruling by the Attorney General, on a ruling on whether counties can be in it or opt out of it and still have voting rights and the funding part of it, so.
Okay.
Greg, did you say that there were 2 laws that were going to go through Tallahassee? One
That's what-
requiring them, one allowing?
Yeah.
Right.
It's on both sides of the aisle, from what Margaret was telling me, that one of them saying, one piece of legislation is saying that if you want to opt out, you can opt out. You don't have to be part of a regional planning council as a community or as a city or a county. And the other one's saying, no, it is required, and then you have to have it in order to get certain, whether it's a development order or a larger type of developments in there, you have to have the vote of the regional. And if
Do
you
you
are
recall
part
what-
of it, you have to be a paying dues member, and you have to be present, and there's a quorum in the whole 9 yards.
Do you recall offhand what their budget is?
No, I don't off the top of my head. Meeting tomorrow at 9. So.
Okay, great. Thanks, Greg. Steve? Good. Okay.
I just
Mike,
had
I'm sorry.
One thing I forgot. I think in the past, in the Lightner Creek area, we had done a thing where we made it to where you didn't have to replace the mobile home with another mobile home. You could, go to residential housing. And, with all the damages that's in some of these trailer parks, is that something that we can look at these trailer parks also? So that way, instead of just simply putting another mobile home on the lot, they can go manufacture something that's going to stand up to the storms better and the flooding.
What we had done was we had allowed in mobile home zoning districts to allow single-family houses without going through a special exception. So for homeowners that want to replace trailers with a single-family house, they could do that, but that would be one of their options for that replacement.
Or relocation.
Or relocate, it would be if they wanted to remove the trailer and rebuild with a single-family house is where this provision would come in.
So we already allow that.
In mobile home zoning districts, there are places where mobile homes exist where that rule would not apply because they're not in zoning districts that are labeled as mobile home.
So
different rules apply. Different zoning districts have different standards.
So they can still put a mobile home there then if it's...
As part of the post-disaster build back, yes. If
but
you're
they wouldn't looking, be able to do a single family house.
That's not necessarily what I'm saying. I'm saying that depending on where the zoning district is, would depend on what the rules would apply there. Most cases, they could put a single-family house there. It would be a rare occurrence where they couldn't.
And the elevation standards?
They would have to meet current standards with a new structure, but that would depend on them being in a flood district or whether they're not in a flood district.
Thank you. Fred? Okay, yep.
So
Greg, what was
about where you're saying they're not a mobile home district or zoning in place? What's an example and would they be able to do the single family?
Some of them are located in AG2, some of them are located in single family residential. In those particular cases, yes, they would be able to.
Okay.
But off the top of my head, I cannot tell you where every single mobile home is located or all the zoning districts. That's why I was providing a little bit of a caveat.
Greg, what was that thing you saw with the homes? Remember?
All the
Yeah.
Katrina cottages that we
Yeah.
looked at?
Yeah, yeah.
They're like tiny homes.
Yeah.
Basically, and that's what, yeah.
No,
that's
no,
what the one.
900, 300?
There was different sizes. We've seen a couple,
No,
we've
it's
seen a
also
couple
9.
sizes, yeah.
But they're small.
Well, what it is, you know, back in Charlie in '04, they had
Yeah.
FEMA City up in Charlotte County, which is a bunch of trailers. So when Katrina came through, instead of putting those trailers there, they did like tiny houses, like if you're on, was it HGTV or whatever, they have those
Nice
tiny
looking.
houses that look like little bitty houses, but they're not anywhere from 300 to 900 square foot
Yep.
homes. And
They might be on wheels and they might be mobile.
the ones that they showed in,
Seemed like
they were permanent. They
I
may have been on
understood.
stilts.
Understood, sure.
So,
There
but
are
they look like a
other
little Florida
options.
cottage. They
Right,
look like a
right.
little Florida
Next
cottage.
evacuation, maybe just get a trailer hitch and we could solve a few problems.
Mike, just to follow up on your comment, because I have asked for information from John in regard to all these, what I think are confusing regulations for building, but because he's, you know, has expertise in that, I thought it would be helpful for us to understand just how they would impact by neighborhood. Because when I go to affected areas, these are the questions they ask me all the time, and I don't have a good answer. So, and then there's also been a suggestion that we might need some adjustments to building regulations for rebuild of trailer home entities because of these extra appurtenances that they put on their properties. That hopefully they get building permits if they want to put a carport in, but, you know, instead of having like a metal post, maybe we would have something, we would require something more permanent. And if they put a new roof on, they shouldn't attach it to the housing unit because that created all, I mean, these kinds of things, I think, again, for the longer term, I would hope that we as a city review them and review them for the long term. And in the short term, I think it would be helpful if we had a consolidated information sheet that tells people whether they can replace them or they can't replace them and what circumstances are. Because I think there is confusion there. So I'm in favor of what you're saying, is that we should have a better understanding of whether we can replace them or not, because a lot of those homes are worried or concerned that they can't replace them.
And just so council understands, I have had our building official at Imperial Bonita Estates, at Citrus Park. I've also had him in what I'll call the Edith Downs area to talk with those homeowners and renters directly, so they understood exactly what they could do and what they needed to do to accomplish that. Because you're right, there are varied levels of regulation that apply because this was a storm. It can get complicated. It's easier for one person to go out there and provide them a direct answer than it is to try to provide a blanket statement for the entire city.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that effort, but my impression is they still don't get it because they're still asking the same question. So you know,
We
over
are-
time. When you get a chance, if we could get as much clear information to the affected area so they could look up the sheet and say, oh, yes, I can replace my home, or, oh, no, I might have an issue, you know. It could be as simple as that.
That's fine. It will be a different sheet for just about every neighborhood, but that's fine.
Well-
Yes, ma'am.
Great, thank you. Mike, anything else? Fred?
On that letter that we approved for you to sign on the South Florida Water, I would ask that staff, after it's developed, before it goes to the mayor for signature, let city council look at it, because I think what's going to be important is not necessarily the motion, but the preamble to the motion, why, and all that. So I think that, I'm sure several of us can add something to it. So that'd be my request.
Okay, council, anything further? Okay. Audrey, what's next?
Public comment?
Okay. All right, we'll go to public comment at this time. Any member of the public that would like to speak, please come forward.
Did we wear them out yet? Rick's not even here.
Yeah.
Everybody's
Good morning. I'm Alan Glazier from San Carlos Estates. Thank you all for your diligence and your hard work. I appreciate that. I know it's been a lot. There's been a few things that were mentioned this morning that I heard. One of the things I believe we really need to address that as far as rebuilding.
Thank you.
Some of the houses like over in the Quinn section, south of Imperial and like that, if they are on a concrete slab, I know it would be a lot, but if it's continually rebuilding these and like that, or gutting them and redoing it, I don't know if that's the answer, and it could be built up on piers on top of the slab and then get it up higher. And of course, the piling houses are definitely preferable, but you know, I mean, anyways. Also, was mentioned about what we do as far as a shelter is concerned. I mentioned before that I really didn't like, as you all know, doing away with the community hall, but if we could find something else that we could do for a shelter and the kitchen and like that in the future, I think it'd be a great service to Bonita. I'm having problems, and I know there's other people that are, we're talked to some of y'all and Carl and like that about the horticulture pickup. What I'm asking for is that Advanced Disposal do their job as far as what I'm concerned. I consider their job, what we contract with them, what we pay for, is that they come out and pick up some horticulture every week that's put up there, instead of the answer that I'm getting that's saying that FEMA's going to do it, or you know, whoever. And so when I put out a 6-foot log that's 50 pounds or less, and it's a normal thing that's usually picked up, I want it picked up. And that also has to do with trash that I'm seeing around town that's just now, some of it's got picked up at this point. And I realized, okay, we'll try to work with them and say, okay, give you some latitude and time. But to have this excuse now that they're so overwhelmed that they can't pick up a little bit every week, I don't think that's acceptable. We're paying them to do this, and it ought to be done. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Alan. Good afternoon.
Wanted to say good morning, but it is good afternoon. And for the record, Kathy McGrath. And I have a few things I want to bring up. Not in any order of importance. The first is kudos to the Lions Club. I went to the grand opening years ago, and if people watching this aren't already aware of it, it is state of the art, and they are providing such a wonderful service to the most needy that need it. So thanks to them. Secondly, I want to bring up Riverfest, which is going to go on this Saturday, as most of everyone watching knows. When we had the budget cuts, the Special Events Committee chose to eliminate it. And people have stepped up, and it's going to go on. It may be a little different, but it's going to go on. And I can't name all of them because I know I'll leave some out. But the two most important, of course, John Pano and Martha, Martha started our fall festival years ago. The city took it over, and she stepped up wonderfully with her Lions Club, as has John. So, I mean, they've had to change the challenge because of the condition of the waters upriver, and this is something interesting if you all saw it on both NBC and Wink. Styrofoam, you know, everyone's saying, where's all this styrofoam coming from? Well, guess what? They used it as insulation in the mobile homes. And then, as John pointed out, you know what styrofoam is, breaks down. The fish and the birds, they think that's food. They eat it, they're full, so they starve to death. Maybe that's a new diet we should all go on, huh? All right, but anyway, come down on and I can't thank everybody, but I do want to mention that the Imperial River Conservancy is providing all the prize money for the races and other things that are going on. So, and the next thing is our own wonderful Corporal Bobby Hunter is one of 5 finalists for Officer of the Year. I believe it's on Saturday, and I don't know who votes on it, but he's got my vote. My gosh, all the stuff that he's done for the veterans. But you know what? You know how I feel about our community policing. They're the best of the best. They really are. And also the Film Fest, the gala, is November 2nd, and Antonio has told us that they had more entries than ever, and he was so pleased that there were so many younger. But we are going to shorten the program. You're not going to have to sit there for hours and hours, and it's going to be great. And finally, I just want to mention, as most of you know, I had a lot of damage at my house. I was concerned about storm surge or flooding. Water never hit my dock, but the wind, I had the shutters, but the wind ripped 2/3 of my porch away, half of my roof, and the thing unfortunate, I evacuated. I was comfortable. BSU had water, believe it or not. Where I was, they were on wells, and I went home and took a cold shower every day. But they did a great job, and I lost a canoe and a kayak, which I'm not quite really worried about, but if anyone sees a yellow canoe somewhere, you know, you can have it. But the reason I wanted to bring this up is a little tidbit. I was in one of our local sandwich shops in center of Bonita yesterday, and the woman there was saying that customers were in there, and they were complaining bitterly 2 days after the storm that they didn't have Wi-Fi. They went so far as to contact corporate headquarters. You know, come on, folks, get a life. We've got people suffering here and had mud and water and everything in their house, and you're worrying about Wi-Fi? Thanks for everything. You had a lot of important discussion this morning, and it was very interesting. Thanks.
Thank you, Kathy. Other members of the public that would like to speak? Okay, we're going to go back to Arlene, who pointed out.
Actually, item 9,
Okay.
which I apologize, I put 10 before 9. Let me go through the ordinances. The first ordinance is an ordinance of the City Council of Bonita Springs, Florida, adopting the 2017 5-year capital improvement program annual update, providing for legislative findings, providing for severability, providing for exclusion from codification, providing for an effective date. This ordinance, first of all, we continued it because of the local planning agency who did review it for consistency with the comprehensive plan and did find it consistent. So there were no real qualitative comments. They did have some questions as to CIP items, which I pointed out to them. That's really during budget, if you think a project here should be there, or vice versa. So this is only to coincide with your budget. I've explained this ordinance a couple times. I don't know if you want another explanation for the public, but it is mandatory for purposes of state statutes with the EAR. Even though the EAR is being challenged, there's no prohibition of going forward to comply with the state statute.
Council?
So moved.
Okay. So moved in a second?
Do we have to have public hearing on
Yep.
this?
Okay, so council's good for now. Okay. Any member of the public that would like to speak on this subject? Seeing none, further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Caramba?
Aye.
Councilman DeWitt?
Aye.
Councilman Slapka?
Aye.
Mayor Simmons?
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn?
Aye.
Councilman Gibson?
Aye.
Councilman Forbes?
Aye.
Thank you. I'm going to do, the next item is a request to continue a second public hearing to November 15, 2017. I'll read the title block into the record. It's been previously advertised for the second reading. at a prior hearing. This is an amendment to the Bonita Springs Land Development Code, Chapter 3, Development Standards, amending Section 3-292, Traffic Impact Statements, providing for conflicts of law, severability, codification, Scrivener's errors, inclusion in code, and effective date. Staff is requesting a continuance to November 15th, as stated forth in the agenda, and that's to provide time for the City Council to review the administrative code and to either adopt or modify. At that time, staff will present the data and analysis verifying the process and accuracy of the TIS process intended in the administrative code, and then it makes sense to adopt the actual code.
So move.
Second. Okay, great. So moved in a second. Further discussion? Roll call.
Councilman Dewitt,
Aye.
Councilman Slackton.
Aye.
Mayor Simmons.
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn.
Aye.
Councilman Gibson.
Aye.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Councilwoman Caramba.
Aye.
Audrey, anything
Yeah,
else?
City
Yes.
Attorney report?
Yep.
Might as well. We just did public comment, so now's great.
Okay, my apologies. I'm requesting council to review the October 6, 2017 letter. I provided it to you a week ago under separate cover, and then I've included it again here. The previous one, I put the qualifications of Mr. Cloud. This is all he does, municipal utilities work for municipalities. So he is one that is qualified. I did talk to 3 different attorneys when going through the process for retaining, and we've discussed that issue before with you. If you have any questions as to his letter, I'll be happy to do it. I tried to break it down into basically 4 paragraphs. Of course, whenever you break something down, there may be questions as to the breakdown, as well as what I might have talked with Mr. Cloud about. Of course, and to council, I'll be happy to say anything, you know, but I've copied you on every letter I ever sent him and everything else there. Quite frankly, today I'm asking for you to tell me, is the letter satisfactory? And if you do have other questions, we can ask him additional questions, or whether you even want a presentation at this time, and if so, when would be the appropriate time for such a presentation, or if he should gear it towards anything. My recommendation is that you accept the letter, and if you wish to retain his services for additional negotiation at a later date on the franchise, we look at that in spring of 2022.
Okay, so move.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Second, further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman Slackton.
Aye.
Mayor Simmons.
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn.
Aye.
Councilman Gibson.
Aye.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Councilwoman Caramba.
Aye.
Councilman Dewitt.
Aye.
Audrey, anything else?
No, sir, that concludes.
Great, thank you. City Managers Report. Carl.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First off, presentation of the monthly financial reports as well as the capital projects report. Any questions? Okay. Item C is a brief update on the skate park. Council had asked that, given the size of the proposed new skate park relative to the old one, with Hurricane Irma, we've got some insurance reimbursements that are probably going to be coming forward. It might provide some additional opportunities for us. So we're holding on that information until we get more information on the insurance reimbursement. It's possible we may be able to do more than what we had originally suggested. So I just wanted to give you that brief update and let you know that we'll be coming forward when we have more information.
The insurance is on the skate park.
Yes.
Okay.
Great.
Are you saying between the lines, we might have got lucky for once?
And we shouldn't ask
Is
him.
that on camera?
No.
All right.
Good job.
Good job.
And then item D, going to have Arlene.
Good afternoon, Arlene Hunter, Assistant City Manager. I will begin giving a brief overview, and then I'll ask Director Matt Feeney to come forward. Previously, City Council directed staff to begin discussions with Alta Planning and Design to look at providing us with a scope of work and budget for the multi-use pathways. We are in receipt of of the RTP grant as well as community development block grants to move forward with the West Terry Street project. They have provided a scope of work with several options, which Matt Feeney will go over a couple of those options. But from the recommendations of staff, so that we can keep the projects going forward, we ask you to consider tasks 1 and 2 as priorities, but of course, it's council's pleasure on the remaining items as well.
Good afternoon. My name is Matt Feeney, Public Works Director for the City of Bonita Springs. Sorry. Basically, we did get 4 scopes of work. 2 of them are very much so interrelated. Scope 1 is really to conduct an engineering analysis to figure out the exact what of a project for the West Terry Street area where we receive the grant funds would look like. So for example, components that might be considered in addition to the pathway would be perhaps a widened shoulder for the on-street road bikers, or enclosed drainage, or possibility with utilities going underground. So that first step is really for the engineering firm to work with the community as well as city staff to understand what that project should look like, more so than from point A to point B, kind of what those details would be. That would then follow into the actual, which is task 2, construction and design of the project all the way through to construction oversight. So that would be taking that input that you got from task 1 and putting it into a set of plans that we can put out to bid and construct, and then actually overseeing that construction to make sure that it's built in accordance with plan. So what we're recommending at a minimum is that City Council consider approving both task 1 and 2, because that'll allow the area that have identified through our workshop as well as through the grant application and the grant funds we've received. It'll be able for us to take that to fruition or to completion from the planning and design perspective. Task 3 is really kind of a standalone task that we had asked them to give us a pricing on, which would be developing the concept of a pocket park / trailhead for the right-of-way that the city had received that runs north along the FP&L power line easements. That was a potential trail that currently has really been not sidetracked, but lower prioritized compared to the West Terry Street main body. But the thought was you could look at what that feature would be that would then plug into something in the future. It really is City Council's, we don't see any reason that it needs to be proceeded with in the immediate future or pursued. And then task 4, we asked them to price was to develop a design standards manual. Some you may hear it referred to as a beauty book in other circles, but essentially what that would do is create a manual for the city, specific to the city of Bonita Springs, that has the components of these type projects clearly defined, that we could then hand to, say, less nationally recognized designers here in the community and say, for future trail projects, follow these design guidelines, and we don't have to pay for that necessarily that cutting edge expertise anymore, because we have it codified in a manual. One important subpoint to that, though, is, and it's referenced in task 1, is the alternate alignments at Pauling, Cochrane, Pine Street, or potentially West Terry Street. In task 1 and 2, there will be some look at that, but not a complete recommendation. So the folks at Alta really contemplated that in task 4 is where the effort in really vetting which alignment would be the best, which or multiple alignments along that corridor. So task 4 does have a component of figuring out that connection from Pine easterly to Old 41 in it. And
Matt, you told me, but I forgot which one it is. Do you remember offhand? In 4, which one is that scoping of what you just talked about, Pine to Old 41?
It's really referenced up in
4.2. 4.2. That's what I thought. But is it?
It's better referenced in the preamble of task 1.
Well, yeah, but that's covered, so, but is
Yeah.
there anything, maybe I'm wrong, I thought you were telling me the other day there's part of 4 that relates to that, one of those items.
There is, and it's not as clearly defined.
Okay.
It's been asserted from the Brad who works for the Alta that's where it is, and it's also referenced really in Task 1 that it will be further developed in Task
Okay.
4.
I have a question, because I thought that this project was supposed to be kind of like a model from which we could task other similar projects. And are we getting that branding by just doing 1 or 2, or do we have to do 4 in order to get that? I think that's really, really important that we have it. I know it's, anyway, and then how much money do we get anyway? I can't remember. What was
It's
it?
$200,000
So we-
from the state.
Well, we don't have enough to do both of these. We still have to put some money out of our general fund to do this, or something
Well, we
else.
got it budgeted.
I mean, we have a budget for it. But I think that I would be in favor of being sure that we have whatever it is, this model executed in whichever, maybe we can do part of 4 to be included in. And I have 3 minutes to make my piece, and then I have to leave. But no, I have to leave at 12:45. But if the council would consider that when they explore this in detail, if we could include that, I would be in favor of that. And not that the other stuff isn't important, it's just that, we want a total citywide branding of multimodal transportation. And if that's not being done by 1 and 2, then we should recommend that we do at least part of 4.
If I might answer your question very quickly, to get the comprehensive from what you're asking for, you really need to include Task 4. Will a portion of that be done in Task 1 and 2? Yes, but very specific to the West Terry Street pathway. So, things like further phases, like where Councilman DeWitt's district, where there's a wall that will be near the trail.
Right.
Those kinds of things, how that would look, typical cross sections, those would really come out of Task 4.
Well, I would agree with Councilwoman Carumba on that. The only thing I'd add is that it is important that 1 and 2 as a priority be given their top priority.
Correct.
Because we really want to get something done on the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll make the motion to do all 4 tasks, because Task 3, we had the property donated specifically for this. So, to get something designed where we can build it a little further down the road, at least we have the design. We're paying for the experts right now. We might as well get their expertise to, get the plans drawn up. And then when we have the money, we have it ready to go and we can just do it.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Easy come, easy go.
Been a motion and a second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mayor Simmons.
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn.
Aye.
Councilman Gibson.
Aye.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Councilwoman Carumba.
Aye.
Councilman DeWitt.
Aye.
Councilman Slakta.
I just want to thank, personally, Matt and Arlene for all their hard work on this, and also Jim Worcester, who was a very, very big part of getting that $200,000 grant. So, great all-around effort.
Great. Thanks, Pete. Council? It's your pleasure. We good? We want to approve the minutes.
Well,
Arlene?
Mayor, just to clarify, we would then, this authorizes the mayor to sign the negotiated contract with the scope, so we will not be bringing the contract back for approval.
Council, okay?
Sounds good.
Thumbs up?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Thought that's what we were voting on.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Okay.
Corporal Hunter.
Any further mayor and council reports?
Yeah, just real quick. On the Sun Trail, Nick Betos and I presented at the ECCL, I guess it was last Friday, well received, having to do with the maintaining the railroad right away as a priority. And big thanks to Don Eslick and the ECCL. They put together one of these deals where you hit a button and an email goes up to Tallahassee in support of that from the ECCL. So, and hopefully people in Bonita Springs as well. The only other thing, Mayor, I would like to suggest is for next Wednesday's meeting that perhaps those of us who have agenda ideas related to water would send them to Carl, and he would build an agenda off of that.
I think that's great as opposed to last minute erratas, which I know everybody's working hard, so yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Mike, anything?
Just want to, again, remind everybody, Riverfest for Irma relief this Saturday, 9 to 8 in Riverside Park. We've got the duck race, the kayak and stand-up paddleboard race, so just come on out.
Great, thank you. Fred?
And I want to build on that. I think this Riverfest, because of the hurricane, actually has the potential to be possibly even more well-attended than in the prior year. Because it's first real public, even though the city's not sponsoring it, most of the people don't view it that way probably. So I think there'll be a big turnout.
Right. Okay, great, thanks. Greg?
I just want to, two things. One, we have a meeting tomorrow at 10 o'clock at IBE. I just want to know if Pete could be there, building official, just to make sure. Because there's probably going to be.
Pete's going to be there.
Okay, just making sure. And the second part, I'm going to apologize up front. I will not be there Saturday. I'll be in Tallahassee with my daughter doing a walkthrough of Florida State, much to my chagrin. So I apologize now. It's not of my doing.
They have a real fall up there, I heard.
Yeah.
Real autumn, spring, I don't know.
It's not going to be then. It's right now they have a cold front, but 85 on Friday and Saturday when I'm doing a walkthrough. So.
They'll get back to football eventually. Steve?
I'll mention it next week, but just a reminder, Veterans Day, our guest speaker is going to be a retired major, and he's going to have quite an interesting story because he is legally blind. So there has to be 3 people to bring him up to the podium, but he's got he wrote a book, he's extremely interesting. I hope you can make it.
Great, thank you. Peter?
Just one quick thing for, I think I've mentioned it, maybe not, but Rita Height said somewhere between 30, they're expecting somewhere between 30 and 35 people tomorrow at IBE. Not that they know exactly. And I forgot to mention that Arlene and I are going to meet together with Nick Betos from Estero and Steve Sarkozy, the city manager. We're going to chat this afternoon with Trust for Public Lands. Tomorrow we're going to chat with the Conservation Fund just about the railroad right away and how they could be involved. Obviously, no decisions are being made. They'll come back here for more explanation. That was it.
Great, thanks, Peter. There's a State Representative Heather Fitzenhagen is having a Hometown Hero Awards event tonight in Fort Myers along with Florida Power and Light. So think back a few weeks. I think I'll be going to that event tonight to say hello, and thanks for when we rang the bell and sent that strongly worded letter. Thank you for setting up your tent city in Bonita Springs and responding to our city's needs. So everything comes full circle. That's tonight. Tomorrow, have a second meeting with some people on the Weeks Fish Camp property in the air of transparency with everything we have going on here. Certainly, that is the focus of some other folks to look at that property. On Friday, meeting with Naples Mayor Bill Barnett. We'll also be attending an Hispanic event at the Mercedes-Benz dealership of Bonita Springs, which is in North Naples, I might add, but I'll be there. And then, of course, we have Riverfest on Saturday, and I guess I'll be presenting the Mayor's Cup there at 6 o'clock. And there is a Indian event, with no disrespect meant, Dots Not Feathers from Goodwill Hunting, on Saturday evening in Bonita Springs as well, that I'll be attending. And we're going to be meeting again next Wednesday. So I guess that'll bring us up to date until next Wednesday's meeting. For me, as we said, there is a lot of media. There's a lot of scrutiny. There's a lot of questions. There's a lot more questions than there are answers. So I would just ask everybody, Councilwoman Carumba included, God bless her, she's not here, to keep that in mind as we move forward. So, great meeting, team, fantastic. That's what I have. Anything additional, council members?
Do you want to mention this thing here, by any chance, or did you?
Oh, well, we, in the, go ahead, Steve, mention that.
Mayor Simmons got a letter from Machen Elgart, is that how you say it? Dear Mayor Simmons, thank you for your letter of August 7th. I'm a little late in replying as I have spent the last couple of months in my native country of Denmark. The audio beeping sound will be terrific. Please try to install as soon as possible. It would help a lot of visually impaired people. Thank you. I have been in contact with Terry Farrell and will attend ADA meeting next week. We'll also contact Fred Forbes to see if we can establish some support group.
Great. Thank you, Steve, for reminding me of that. And I'll remind you of the crate down below came from Tent City. So I'll have, be bringing that up to the mayor's office, and we'll just, hey, as we move forward, it's some collateral material with an American flag, for those that can't see it, right in front of me here, that came from Tent City on Imperial. So with that, we'll move on to public comment. Members,
Mr. Mayor,
yes, Fred.
Can we either here or at something like Riverfest recognize people like the Monkey Man, as you well know? I don't
Yeah,
even know his
absolutely.
name. Yeah. I think they deserve it.
Absolutely, and I think, why don't we all submit names like that from people that just did, I don't know, what's the category? Let's start with the Monkey Man, see where we go, and have him in, Carl, for what he did. For those that don't know this gentleman, I guess he did, you know what, I think things were starting to appear there, but bottom line is he orchestrated that Tent City on Imperial, and for a lot of days, when social services, there were cracks, there were just, look, a lot going on. And, we would hear often, if you can have them come over and pick this up, we might not be able to deliver it. Well, somehow people, let's face it, not everybody's going to get that message to go to the Bonita Springs Assistance Office, although they came down to Tent City, a lot of times right at Tent City, did a phenomenal job. And then they would set up at CVS because there was too much water. But Tent City filled the void here for a while, that just things in real time. It actually even backed up traffic onto Bonita Beach Road. Ask the Lee County Sheriff's Office, they can attest to that. So it just was a spontaneous thing. And keep in mind that I would be happy and would love to, great point, Fred, recognize people like that in town that just dove in to the middle of it and got things done. So thank you.
Little sidebar.
Yes.
I think he literally dove in or fell in the water about 3 to 4 times.
He did need some medical attention, he did.
Needed medical attention.
Right. Your legs got burns, for lack of a better word, from the water, getting in and out of the canoe down there on Quinn Street with me. Of course, I had hip waders on, I think, and maybe you didn't, was the difference there. Thank goodness when we had the flooding before the hurricane, and I was walking down there in my flip-flops, my legs were fine, I'm not sure, but there were some people down there that just didn't have hip waders and appropriate material, Greg, so thank you, I still got them. We have 2 pair that my son and I used, and some others from the fire department, but as we continue to move forward, hey, unbelievable the resilience you see in people. It brings out the best in 99% of the people. Not everybody, but 99% of the people step up to the plate, and you really see what people are made of, because the good comes out in a lot of different ways. So thank you, everybody. God bless. Hashtag Bonita Strong. Kathy, I think it's public comment time.
Thank you, Kathy McGrath. One quick thing. I want everyone watching to realize that even though this is not a city-sponsored event, the city contributed and is helping money-wise for them to put this on. So I want everyone to know that. And Mike, you mentioned, I didn't mention the things that, what they're going to do with the challenge this year is because of upriver. They're going to start it at Riverside, and they're going to have a buoy downriver. So instead of coming up from Kent Road, they're going to go start from Riverside, go around the buoy and come back. And, like Martha's selling, they're going to have the rubber duck race. Please buy tickets for that because there's nice prizes for that. And I'm told there's also going to be a fish fry. It's not the old gang that did it, but someone's stepping up. I don't know too much about it, so I don't want to say it. But everybody, come on out and support this Irma thing. And as Bobby Bird said from Rotary, Sarah Hadika has stepped up, and she wanted to do a benefit. And I believe her concert is going to be Friday night, the 27th at Riverside Park, and that is also to benefit Irma thing. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. Hello, Ed.
How you doing, guys? Ed Fitzgerald. If I'm not mistaken, you just accepted Audrey's not Audrey's, but Tom Cloud's report as final document.
To be sent out?
You hired Mr. McLeod to give you an opinion as to the city's authority and responsibility with the BSU contract. He produced this 12-page report, and Audrey presented it to you and as the answer. That answered all the questions. Unless I don't understand what you just did. But Mr. McLeod broke his report down into 5 sections, and each one of the sections, I just want to say a word on it. He claims the state regulation of BSU is absent because they were created under Chapter 617. That is not true, and I said that. BSU was formed under Chapter 125. Item 2, he says the application of Sunshine Law, BSU is not under the Sunshine Law. I challenge that where he has the absolute authority to tell you that. Sunshine Law is only decided by the Inspector General, Attorney General. On item 3, he mentions the state regulation of water and sewer utilities that BSU has been exempted because they serve solely to members of the franchise. Well, that is not true. BSU has a contract selling water to a private company now called RCS. That's in violation. Okay. There's section 4. He says municipal regulation of the water and sewer systems. He claims that the Florida City has the power to change and exercise control over the BSU. But they are limited. You cannot change that franchise. You can amend and change things, but you cannot change the core of the franchise under any reasons. If you want to change it, you have to nullify it, void it, and write a new one. Now, item 6, he has municipal authority to regulate other items. That's the confusion. I'm confused. That one is the voting. We do not question the authority or the legality of the voting. Mr. Richfield challenged the integrity of it. I have no option but I'm going to hire an attorney and challenge this formally with you. That's it. I don't think the thing was handled exactly right, but appreciate your efforts, your time, and your dedication to this city. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ed. Other members of the public? Seeing none, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We are adjourned.